Chapter 547. In the magnificent hall of the Murong family, Su Qingchen sat calmly drinking tea. Ling Taihan naturally sat beside him, drinking the best quality fragrant tea from Dechu State. Ling Taihan couldn't help but sigh. As expected of the Murong family, this kind of best quality fragrant tea is rarely seen even in Dechu State, Su Qingchen said with a smile. If Brother Ling likes it, I'll have someone send 2 boxes to Brother Su. Ling Taihan raised his eyebrows. There's a lot of this tea in the Northwest. That shouldn't be the case. This kind of tea wasn't common in Dechu State. Although Dechu State was doing business with the Northwest, there were some things that were prohibited from being shipped to the Northwest. This included this tea, which was known as the best fragrant tea in Dechu State. This actually didn't affect the Northwest. It was purely Mo Jingqi's actions to annoy Mo Xiuyao. Su Qingchen smiled faintly. That's not the case. At the beginning of spring, the Northwest imported a batch, and Li sent a few boxes to me. However, this kind of tea is fragrant. If it's too fragrant, it will cover up the natural fragrance of the plants. Our family members don't like it too much. That's why I have more. Ling Taihan's mouth twitched. So you're giving it to me because you don't like it? I know. You scholars are always very particular. Not only do you want the best quality tea, but even the best quality tea has to be divided into different grades. Su Qingchen smiled but didn't say anything. The servants standing by the side were sweating profusely. They had been instructed by the young miss to serve the best tea to young Master Qingchen. Who would have thought that young Master Qingchen didn't like this tea? They didn't know whether they should make do with this mistake or give young Master Qingchen another cup of tea. Ha! Young Master Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen, your presence brings light to my humble Murong family. The Murong family's patriarch smiled brightly, as if he were a warm and hospitable host. Murong Mingyan, whose face was covered by a veil, was next to him. She looked at Su Qingchen with an amiable smile. However, this kind of amiability made the 2 outsiders present, Ling Taihan and Su Qingchen, feel goosebumps all over their bodies. Su Qingchen smiled and said, Master Murong, you're being too courteous. May I know why Master Murong has sent someone to invite me here? The Murong family's master laughed and said, Young Master Qingchen is a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. I heard that young Master Qingchen is still single after the new year. Su Qingchen's expression changed slightly, but his half-closed eyes darkened slightly. He said faintly, that is indeed the case. Murong clan master smiled in satisfaction. Young Master Qingchen, what do you think of my Mingyan? Murong Mingyan blushed and glanced at Su Qingchen shyly. However, she saw that Su Qingchen was calmly staring at the teacup in front of him. He did not even look at her. She couldn't help but feel stifled in her heart. A little grievance welled up in her heart, and the rims of her eyes immediately turned red. Ling Taihan, who was sitting on the side, raised his eyebrows and glanced at Su Qingchen with a mocking smile. He looked as if he was watching a good show. Su Qingchen was not in a good mood at the moment. The reason was that Mo Xiuyao had guessed the Murong family's plan. When he thought about how Mo Xiuyao, that vile bastard, would laugh at him later, young Master Su's mood would not be good. The Murong family's master, who was full of confidence and a smile, saw that Su Qingchen did not answer for a long time. The smile on his face gradually disappeared. After a while, Su Qingchen said faintly, Thank you for your kindness, Master Murong. However, I don't have any intention of getting married. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. The Murong family's master forced a smile and said, as the saying goes, take care of the family, rule the country, and bring peace to the world. Young master, you've passed the new year and have yet to settle down. You should think about it carefully. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, You're right, Master Zhuang. I've been working hard these past few years to cultivate my body. Unfortunately, my aptitude is too low and I haven't achieved anything. Ling Taihan could not help but secretly laugh when he heard this. However, his martial arts cultivation was profound and his endurance was enough. He forced himself to suppress his laughter. Master Murong had said that he would govern the country and bring peace to the world. Su Qingchen had taken that out of context. Ancient people said that cultivating one's body would govern the country and bring peace to the world. Young Master Su was still working hard on cultivating his body. He did not have the time to govern the family. This kind of rejection was obvious enough, especially in front of Ling Taihan. It could be said that he had cut off the possibility of the Murong family choosing another path. Master Murong's face darkened. He said coldly, "If that's the case, why did young Master Qingchen stay alone with Mingyu last night? Could it be that young Master Su is well educated and does not know that men and women should not touch each other? Do you not know the importance of a girl's reputation? Could it be that young Master Qingchen does not intend to give the Murong family an explanation?" Explanation. Su Qingchen frowned and looked at Master Murong and Murong Mingyan in confusion. The confusion and doubt in her calm eyes almost made the two people unable to maintain the expression on their faces. Su Qingchen said, "Young Lady Murong came to visit last night. Originally, I wanted to talk at the door, but young Lady Murong insisted on talking with me alone. Or did Master Murong think that it would be better for us to be in a deadlock at the door and be seen by passers-by? In addition, even if we talked in private, Master Murong must know my identity. I can guarantee that there were no less than 4 people in the room at that time. Moreover, I did not touch young Lady Murong's finger." Murong Mingyan was ashamed and ashamed. She said with tears in her eyes, "Young Master Qingchen, is Mingyan really not worthy of your attention?" Su Qingchen frowned and said indifferently, "I'm sorry." At this point, it was already a deadlock. Ling Taihan thought about whether he should say something or not. No matter what, it was important for him to get Su Qingchen out of the Murong family in one piece. He did not care about other people, but he was afraid that the old monster Murong Xiong would suddenly make a move. If that happened, they would be in danger today. Master Murong's face darkened. He stared at Su Qingchen and said, "Young Master Qingchen, even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for Prince Ding and Princess Ding, right?" Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows. "Master Murong, please forgive me for not understanding your words." Master Murong sneered, "Not only does my Murong family own 60% of Xiling country's business, we also have a lot of business in Dechu State and Li City in the northwest. Speaking of which, the northwest's iron mines are all bought from Dechu State and Xiling, right? Coincidentally, 70% of the iron mines I buy in Li City are bought from Xiling from the Murong family. For a normal family, they might not use much iron in their lifetime. But for the Prince Ding mansion, which had nearly 1 million soldiers, they would not have weapons without iron mines. Therefore, iron mines were a very important issue for the Northwest. The Murong family was rich, so how could they not see such a huge benefit? As early as when the Northwest and Dechu State had just broken off relations, the Murong family had already taken the initiative to contact the Prince Ding mansion. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and did not speak. If Master Murong could see him, he would definitely see the sneer and coldness in his cold eyes. Unfortunately, Master Murong did not see it, so he took Su Qingchen's silence as a compromise. He nodded proudly and laughed, "Young Master Qingchen, why don't you think about it carefully? Although my Murong family is a merchant family, our wealth is comparable to that of a country. After marrying into the Murong family, young Master Qingchen will be the next master. Isn't it 1,000 times better than being Prince Ding's assistant?" Cough cough. With such shocking words, even Pavilion Master Ling, who was as calm as a mountain, almost choked on his tea. Ling Taihan looked at Master Murong with admiration. "You want Su Qingchen to marry into the family? You really dare to dream. If Su Qingchen does not destroy your Murong family, I will compensate you with the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce." Ling Taihan and Su Qingchen had known each other for a long time. Although they did not meet often, it did not prevent him from understanding Su Qingchen. Because this was the experience he gained from personal experience. Chapter 548. In the end, the two of them were politely escorted out by the servants of the Murong family, who flattered Su Qingchen along the way. It seemed that the servants of the Murong family had already decided that young Master Qingchen would be the future son-in-law of the Murong family. When they were far away from the Murong family, Ling Taihan finally couldn't hold back his laughter. He then looked at Su Qingchen and laughed loudly. Su Qingchen looked at him coldly and asked indifferently, "Is it very funny?" Ling Taihan generously admitted, "It's not bad. After so many years, young Master Qingchen has finally entertained me for once." Young Master Qingchen had always been the one to laugh at other people's jokes. This time, it was finally others' turn to laugh at him. Being forced to marry into the family. If this news were to spread, who knew how many jaws would drop? Su Qingchen glanced at him, then turned and walked in the direction of the city. Ling Taihan looked at his back and rubbed his chin. He threw his second sister and third brother to the back of his mind and followed him with a look of anticipation. Su Qingchen didn't know martial arts, so he could only walk slowly. Ling Taihan followed beside him very easily. "Young Master Qingchen, have you thought of how to deal with the Murong family? Or are you really going to marry into the Murong family and become the richest person in the world?" Su Qingchen stopped and looked at him thoughtfully. Tower Master Ling immediately floated back a few feet in vigilance. "What do you want to do?" "I can't beat that old monster of the Murong family." Su Qingchen smiled. "Someone told me that as long as there's an expert on the same level as Tower Master Ling, it'll be enough to deal with Murong Xiong. Mo Xiaoyao." Ling Taihan gritted his teeth and glanced at Su Qingchen. "No problem, tell Mo Xiaoyao to come himself. I also want to see if he has improved. Also, what benefits do I get from helping you deal with the Murong family?" Friends were friends, business was business. Dealing with the Murong family was a big matter, so he wouldn't do it without some benefits. Su Qingchen clasped his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Of course I won't disappoint you, Brother Ling. But, if we want to deal with the Murong family, it's not enough to have just you and me. We need a partner." Ling Taihan frowned and said in a deep voice, "Lei Zhenting." Ling Taihan was able to become the head of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce at such a young age and become one of the top 4 experts in Jianghu. Naturally, he wasn't stupid. Within Shiling's borders, it would be extremely difficult to deal with the Murong family, a behemoth that even the royal family feared, without official permission. "Lei Zhenting will cooperate with you?" The enmity between him and Mo Lufang is known to the whole world. There are no eternal friends in this world, and similarly, there are no eternal enemies. "Lei Zhenting will come and find us himself." Leaving these words behind, young Master Qingchen flew away. Only Ling Taihan was left behind. He shook his head and sighed helplessly. It seems like the Murong family's fate is already at its end. Otherwise, how could they have offended this god? "Prince." Genom of Gojoseon looked at the competition on the stage with a solemn expression. Lei Tengfeng, who was sitting behind him, knew that his father's thoughts were no longer on the stage. "How is it?" Genom of Gojoseon asked the gold-robed guard in front of him. The gold-robed guard said in a low voice, "I just received news that the Murong family wants young Master Qingchen to marry into their family." Genom of Gojoseon was startled, but he soon sneered, "They're dreaming." What was Su Qingchen's reaction? The gold-robed guard said, "Young Master Qingchen didn't seem to agree. When he left just now, young Master Qingchen didn't look too good. At this time, he has already returned to the city." Genom of Gojoseon lowered his head and pondered for a long time. Lei Tengfeng said in a low voice, "Su Qingchen became famous at such a young age and was born into a scholarly family. He must be proud and arrogant. It would be difficult for him to agree to such a proposal." Genom of Gojoseon frowned. He turned to look at Lei Tengfeng and asked, "Tengfeng, if you were Su Qingchen, would you agree?" Lei Tengfeng thought for a moment, then nodded honestly and said, in reply to Imperial Father, I would agree. Genom of Gojoseon nodded and smiled, what you said is the truth. Let's go back to the city. Standing up, Genom of Gojoseon turned and walked out of the arena. Lei Tengfeng naturally followed immediately. Leng Luyue, who was sitting to the side, saw the two people leave. She then looked at the seats in the front row that were mostly empty. She thought for a moment and said, third brother, let's go too. Sickly scholar naturally wouldn't refute Leng Luyue's words. He nodded and also stood up to leave. Ren Qining, who was currently sparring in the arena, glanced at the empty seats below from the corner of his eye. A cold light flashed in his eyes and he flipped his sword to send his opponent off the arena. Standing on the arena, Ren Qining looked at the Murong family not far away from the arena. Su Qingchen bid farewell to Ling Taihan and walked around the city before returning to the inn that he was temporarily staying at. As soon as he entered the room, he saw two people sitting in the room. Before Su Qingchen could say anything, a few shadow guards pounced at him. Genom of Gojoseon naturally didn't care about these shadow guards. With a cold laugh, he put down his teacup and casually struck out with his palm. The shadow guards clearly realized that they were not this person's opponent. Their figures intertwined, and in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, two of them entangled the Zhennan Wang, while the other two pounced towards Lei Tengfeng. At the same time, two more people appeared behind Su Qingchen and stood in front of her. Stop! Su Qingchen opened his mouth to stop them. Before he finished speaking, the shadow guards had already stopped their attacks and retreated to the side with their bodies bowed. Genom of Gojoseon clapped his hands and laughed, good, as expected of the Prince Ding Mansion's shadow guard. You really live up to your reputation. Young Master Qingchen, I hope that you will forgive me for taking the liberty of visiting. Su Qingchen walked out from behind the shadow guards and waved his hand, saying, you may leave. Genom of Gojoseon has no ill intentions. Your subordinates will take their leave. The shadow guards didn't delay and left after confirming Su Qingchen's words. Genom of Gojoseon raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but look at this gentle and graceful young Master Qingchen in a new light. Oh? How can young Master Qingchen be so sure that I have no ill intentions? Su Qingchen laughed, if Genom of Gojoseon wanted to ambush me, you could have done it anywhere. Why wait in the inn? Genom of Gojoseon nodded and said, that's right. I really envy Prince Ding. Not only does he have a wise person like young Master Qingchen to assist him, but his subordinates are also well trained. Originally, I wanted to sneak in quietly, but I didn't expect to be discovered. What's more, they were actually able to keep their composure. Su Qingchen walked over to Genom of Gojoseon and sat down. He took a celadone teacup and poured himself a cup of tea. He smiled and said, Prince Ding, you flatter me. Su Qingchen smiled and looked at Genom of Gojoseon and said, I know why Genom of Gojoseon is here. I have no interest in selling myself to anyone. Genom of Gojoseon smiled strangely, the Murong family's wealth is comparable to that of a country. Su Qingchen smiled indifferently, wealth comparable to that of a country is only useful if one knows how to use it. If a person only needs 100,000 taels to live the most extravagant life, then, what's the point of 1,000,000 taels to him? When silver reaches a certain level, it's just a number. The South Protecting King narrowed his eyes and sized up Su Qingchen. I don't understand what you mean. Su Qingchen smiled and said, with my current status, I am very short on money. Even 1,000,000 or 10,000,000 wouldn't be too much. But with a different status, 8 or 10,000 would be enough. Genom of Gojoseon's eyes flashed and he cupped his hands, young master is very talented. If I can't have someone like you to assist me, I will regret it for the rest of my life. Prince Ding is very fortunate. Su Qingchen's words were easy to understand. He was now an important person in the Northwest and was in charge of the Northwest's government. Naturally, the more money he had, the better. But young Master Qingchen had no interest in money. Genom of Gojoseon looked at him and said, young Master Qingchen doesn't seem surprised by Ai's visit. Or perhaps young Master Qingchen has been waiting for I to come. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, I just said a few words to Pavilion Master Ling. In this world, there are no eternal friends, nor are there eternal enemies. Now, I'll add, there are only eternal benefits. At least for now, you and I have the same goal, right? Or, does Genom of Gojoseon think that I don't have the ability to control the Murong family? There are no eternal friends, nor are there eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. Insightful. Genom of Gojoseon praised. I'm just copying the wisdom of others. I just happened to hear the princess mention it and felt that it was appropriate. Isn't that right? Su Qingchen asked as he drank his tea. Princess Consort Ding. Ah. Princess Consort Ding is indeed a rare woman. Since young Master Qingchen has the confidence to control the Murong family, why do you want to cooperate with I? Genom of Gojoseon asked. A waste of time, Su Qingchen said bluntly. Of course, he could take over the Murong family, but it would take 10 days to half a month. It wouldn't be easy to accomplish in 3 to 5 years. But now, if Mo Xiaoyao let Su Qingchen go for so long for the Murong family, he would rather burn down all of the Murong family's properties. If Su Qingchen left, who would take care of his official business and the people's livelihood? Genom of Gojoseon lowered his eyes and thought about Su Qingchen's words. If he could, he would never cooperate with Su Qingchen. Cooperation meant that he couldn't enjoy the benefits alone. Most of the Murong family's benefits were in Xiling and belonged to Xiling. But if he didn't agree, Genom of Gojoseon didn't doubt that Su Qingchen would find a way to sabotage him even if he didn't want to marry into the Murong family. Besides, there was still the Dechu state. If he forced the Murong family to submit to the Dechu state, the losses would outweigh the gains. After a long time, Genom of Gojoseon raised his head and asked, What do you want, young Master Qingchen? Su Qingchen smiled in satisfaction. All of the Murong family's properties in the northwest will belong to the Prince Ding mansion. As for those in Xiling, I don't want much. 30% will belong to the Prince Ding mansion and 1% to the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce. Genom of Gojoseon's face darkened. Young Master Qingchen's appetite is a little too big. He asked for 40% of the Murong family's properties. That was equivalent to 20% of the Xiling's properties. Su Qingchen smiled faintly. Genom of Gojoseon means that Jinan Palace can take down the Murong family alone? Or can Genom of Gojoseon guarantee that the Dechu state, Nanzhao, and northern tribes won't interfere? Although the royal family of the northern tribes didn't send anyone this time, but we are now in Genom of Gojoseon's territory. I don't believe that Genom of Gojoseon doesn't know what the northern tribes are up to. Also, does Genom of Gojoseon have the confidence to deal with Murong Xiong? Chapter 549. Does Genom of Gojoseon have the confidence to deal with Murong Xiong? Su Qingchen's words were understated, but in Genom of Gojoseon's ears, it had a completely different meaning. Jianghu's experts seemed unable to affect the overall situation, but experts at Murong Xiong's level couldn't help but make people wary. No matter how much he had the upper hand, if he were to fight to the death, even if he had to risk his life to take your life, there were not many people in this world who would be able to resist him. The higher one's position, the more they cherished their lives. Genom of Gojoseon naturally didn't want to let go of such a huge threat to himself. He wanted to unify the world and destroy Mo Liufang's descendants, but if he died at the hands of someone from Jianghu, then he would have nothing left. Young Master Qingchen persuaded Ling Taihan to act. That's right, Ling Taihan has a good relationship with young Master Qingchen and Prince Ding. Genom of Gojoseon said in a deep voice. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, Friendship is friendship, business is business. I won't hide it from Prince. This time, I only came on the way from Nanzhao. I didn't bring many people from the northwest. However, if I can persuade Pavilion Master Ling to act, then I can also persuade the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce to follow my orders. This time, I'm afraid that the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce will have to contribute the most. Prince Ding giving up 10% of the profits isn't too much. Genom of Gojoseon had nothing to say. The 10% profit that Su Qingchen spoke of was 100,000 or even 1,000,000 taels of silver for him. Looking at the smiling young master in white sitting in front of him, Genom of Gojoseon once again felt something stuck in his chest. He couldn't spit it out or swallow it. I don't understand why young Master Qingchen wants to act against the Murong family. Speaking of which, the existence of the Murong family isn't without benefits for the Northwest, right? Genom of Gojoseon asked. As long as the Murong family existed, the Northwest's economy would never catch up to the Dechu state. Compared to the hundreds of families contending in the Dechu state, the Murong family of West Hill had been the dominant family for too long. Su Qingchen took a sip of tea and sighed softly. I did think of cooperating with the Murong family. Unfortunately, some people are too ignorant. Now that the Murong family is able to become a hidden danger in Xiling, it may not be impossible for them to become a hidden danger in Ding Wangfu in the future. Zhenan Wang was silent for a while before he respectfully said, I understand. I will do as young Master Qingchen said. If there's anything you need me to do, young Master Qingchen can just send someone to inform Tengfeng. Lei Tengfeng understood that his father wanted him to take care of this matter. He nodded and cupped his hands towards Su Qingchen. I hope young Master Qingchen can give me some pointers. Su Qingchen smiled faintly. Your Highness is too serious. Not long after Genom of Gojoseon and his son left, Ling Taihan floated in through the half-open window. He looked at Su Qingchen and smiled. It's rare that young Master Qingchen would think of me. I didn't waste my efforts to make friends with you. If I could have more friends like you, I wouldn't have to worry about the livelihood of those idiots at home. Su Qingchen looked up and smiled. So Pavilion Master Ling agrees? Ling Taihan nodded. Of course I agree. Why wouldn't I agree to such a good thing? With this deal, it won't be a problem to prevent the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce from opening for 3 to 5 years. But, you're a lot more generous this time. I thought that even if you didn't want to take the lead, you would at least split it with Lei Zhenting. Su Qingchen said, West Hill is Genom of Gojoseon's territory after all. If we push them too hard, we'll only lose the chicken and the eggs. It's already not bad to get 30% without risking anything. Any more and we'll be hated by others. Ling Taihan frowned. You've helped Lei Zhenting this time. He's been thinking about making a move on the Murong family for a long time. Aren't you afraid that he'll make things difficult for you after he calms down? West Hill's national treasury isn't rich. Once he calms down, I'm afraid that even the 1,000,000 soldiers of the Prince Ding mansion won't be able to withstand him. No matter how brave and skilled the Prince Ding mansion was, it couldn't avoid the shortcomings of being too small and barren. It was sandwiched between 3 big countries. They couldn't attack the wealthiest Dechu state, and they couldn't use the northern tribes in the north. Moreover, the valiant people beyond the Great Wall were not comparable to the scholars of Dechu state. West Hill was also eyeing them covetously. Although the Northwest had been governed well in recent years, in the eyes of most people, the future was worrying. Su Qingchen gracefully used the cup lid to gently brush the tea leaves floating on the surface of the water. She laughed softly. It's easy to destroy many things, but to rebuild, it's extremely difficult. If Lei Zhenting thinks that West Hill's business can be revived as long as the Murong family falls, I'm afraid he'll be disappointed. Although he can get a large sum of military funds. But at least, in 3 to 5 years, West Hill will only be poorer than before. Shaking the Murong family was equivalent to shaking the entire West Hill's economy. Without 3 to 5 years, no matter how talented the masters were, they wouldn't be able to save it. Moreover, in this era, except when they were poor, the nobles generally didn't pay much attention to businessmen. Naturally, those who were proficient in finance were even rarer. If Genom of Gojoseon thought that everything would go smoothly without the Murong family, and that the politics and people would be harmonious, it could only mean that he himself had never studied the economy. It seemed that occasionally listening to Li Er's chatter was quite beneficial. At least sometimes, she raised some points that even someone as intelligent and farsighted as young Master Qingchen had never thought of. Thinking of the woman who once spoke with assurance in the study, her face full of confidence and joy, Su Qingchen's face revealed a faint smile. Ling Taihan was silent for a long time before he sighed. I thought you were scheming against the Murong family. Now it seems that you're scheming against Lei Zhenting. That's right, even though the Murong family was known as the richest family, but no one had ever clearly calculated how much wealth Ding Wangfu had. Even if it wasn't as good as the Murong family, it could still raise hundreds of thousands of Mahist army under the suppression of the Dechu state's royal family for generations. With this kind of background, it was likely that they didn't really care about the Murong family's gold and silver. Encountering such an opponent, Lei Zhenting could only admit that he was unlucky. You people think too much in your brains. I'm too lazy to think about these things. When you're about to make a move, just send someone to inform me. Ling Taihan said in a low voice. All his life, he pursued the pinnacle of martial arts. He had no interest in Jianghu or the imperial court. Even if it was the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, it was more of a responsibility. Therefore, he naturally didn't have much interest in Su Qingchen's roundabout matters that made his head hurt just by listening to her. Su Qingchen smiled and agreed. She watched Ling Taihan leave through the window, and the room returned to silence. Since that day when Su Qingchen left the Murong family, she didn't reply to any news from the Murong family. The rankings for the new round of the martial arts convention were also released. However, this time, it was clearly a bit awkward. There was no other reason. One of the 4 great masters from the previous 2 tournaments was still alive. Although only 2 of them attended the martial arts convention, they didn't fight. Therefore, this year's young masters couldn't directly occupy the title of number 1 great master. In the end, the martial arts convention, which was originally highly publicized, ended in a somewhat hasty manner. A few days ago, the Murong family was still patiently waiting for Su Qingchen's reply. Moreover, after the martial arts convention, Su Qingchen didn't leave in city. It was normal for young Master Qingchen to take some time to consider something as important as marrying into the family. However, the Murong family gradually realized that something was wrong. Chapter 550. There was still no movement in places further away, but news came from places closer to An City that businesses were starting to have problems. Not only was there interference from the Emperor Xiling, but there was also the shadow of the Dechu state or the Prince Ding mansion. Master Murong thought of the white-clothed figure with a calm smile in the hall of the Murong family, and his face became more and more unsightly. This was just the beginning. When the Murong family found out that their businesses in Great Chu, Nanzhao, and the Northwest all had problems at the same time, and their shops were either closed down or forced to close. Some of them were even directly confiscated. Only then did the Murong family's head truly understand how powerful that elegant and otherworldly man was. Bastard! Is that Su boy crazy? In the study of the Murong family, Murong Xiong was furious as he read the news reported by his nephew. Murong Mingyan stood behind her grandfather, and her face was covered in tears. She never thought that Su Qingchen would attack the Murong family in order to not marry her. Murong Xiong said angrily, "Pass down the order. I want the Prince Ding mansion to not be able to buy a single iron mine in the Northwest." Master Murong smiled bitterly and said, "I just received news that there are iron mines in the Northwest, and the Prince Ding mansion is not only doing business with the surrounding countries, but also with the countries of the West. The Martial Arts Society convention hasn't even started, and the Northwest has already attacked our shops. I'm afraid Su boy didn't come with good intentions this time." Murong Xiong was so angry that he gasped for breath. How much did the Murong family lose? Master Murong said, All our businesses outside the West Hill are gone. The Murong family's foundation was in the West Hill. Although they had businesses in other places, they weren't enough to really affect the other party's economy, so they didn't have to worry about attacking. He was afraid that when the Murong family's businesses collapsed, the merchants in their own country would celebrate. The West Hill also suffered heavy losses. Not only did the Genom of Gojoseon and the officials suppress us, but many merchants among the people also began to attack us. The Murong family monopolized more than half of the businesses in the West Hill, so they naturally had countless enemies. Murong Xiong sneered and said, "Since they want to fight with us, there's no harm in letting them see how deep the Murong family's wealth is." How could the Murong family's wealth be limited to the shops outside? Even the gold and silver accumulated over hundreds of years was enough to crush those who went against them. The Murong family's master said hesitantly, "Uncle, I'm afraid that this isn't appropriate. Wouldn't that give Genom of Gojoseon a legitimate reason to interfere?" If the conflict between the merchants was too serious and affected the common people, Genom of Gojoseon could directly order his army to wipe out the Murong family and no one would say anything. Murong Xiong could not help but frown. He had been practicing martial arts since he was a child. He was not proficient in politics or business. While the two of them were frowning and thinking hard, a servant came in from outside and reporting to Master, "There is a young Master Renqining outside asking for an audience." Master Murong frowned and said, "Renqining? Who is that?" Murong Xiong had some impression of him and said, "The one who won first place in the martial arts competition. Unfortunately, he is too young. If he was 10 years older, he might be able to surpass Ling Taihan and Lei Jinting." The Murong family's master had no interest in Renqining's martial arts. Even if Murong Xiong's cultivation was profound, he was helpless in the face of the Murong family's current deadlock. "What does he want?" The servant reported. Young Master Ren said that he can resolve the current deadlock for Master. The Murong family's master was startled and turned to look at Murong Xiong. Murong Xiong's old eyes slightly narrowed and said, "Let him in." Not far from the Murong family's residence, two people were sitting leisurely on a lush tree branch and looking at the Murong family's gate. "Li, what do you think Renqining wants to do by coming to the Murong family at this time?" Mo Xiaoyao asked curiously. Yi Li shook her head. She wasn't an immortal, how could she know so clearly? Mo Xiaoyao sighed and said, "We clearly said that we would come out to play, but why do I feel more tired than usual?" Yi Li leaned on his chest and said with a smile, "Isn't that the one who doesn't know martial arts? Although he has the shadow guard to protect him, you also know how powerful that Murong Xiong is. If he suddenly turns hostile, what's the use of Big Brother's intelligence?" If Su Qingchen and Murong Xiong came face to face and made up their minds to kill him, even if Su Qingchen was the smartest person in the world, it would still be a waste. In the face of absolute strength, any scheme would be useless. Mo Xiaoyao sighed and lowered his head to look at Yi Li. Li is right. Now that Renqining is also involved, we really can't leave. Genom of Gojoseon and Ling Taihan teamed up to deal with Murong Xiong, but they only had a 50% chance of winning. If Renqining was added in, it would be hard to say what would happen. Mo Xiaoyao didn't care about the others or the Murong family, but at least they had to ensure Su Qingchen's safety. "I'll go in and take a look." Yi Li pulled Mo Xiaoyao back and said, "Murong Xiong's martial arts are much higher than yours. It's better if you don't take the risk." Mo Xiaoyao smiled and looked at her. He reached out and gently brushed her hair behind her ear and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Even if I'm discovered, I can't beat them. Can't I run?" Yi Li frowned and stared at him, "Be careful." Mo Xiaoyao nodded and let go of Yi Li. He silently bypassed the large number of guards in front of the door and went into the Murong family. At this time in the study, Renqining was looking at the three people in front of him with a smile. He was leisurely fanning himself with the fan in his hand. "In the end, who are you and why have you come?" Murong family's head coldly looked at the gentle and scholarly-looking man in front of him. He was very clear that this person was different from young Master Qing Chen. This person's martial arts were ranked first in Jianghu. Ren Qining smiled and said, "My surname is Ren Qining. Greetings to Murong family's head and senior Murong." Murong Xiong coldly snorted. Ren Qining suddenly felt his heart tremble. His blood rushed to his head and he almost fell to the ground. While his heart was amazed by Murong Xiong's profound internal energy, Ren Qining's face was calm. He smiled and praised, "Senior Murong is really a senior expert. This junior admires you." Murong Xiong sneered. How could he not hear that Ren Qining was reminding him not to use his martial arts to bully the younger generation? "Young Master Ren, you didn't come to the Murong family to praise this old man?" Ren Qining smiled and glanced at Murong Mingyan. He smiled and said, "To be honest, I came to ask for Miss Murong's hand in marriage." Ask for her hand in marriage? The three people in the study were stunned. Murong Xiong was the first to react. He sneered, "Why do you think this old man will marry Mingyan to you?" Ren Qining casually tapped his palm with the fan and slowly said, "Now, besides me, is there anyone else who is willing to marry Miss Murong?" "Impudent!" Murong Xiong angrily shouted. Ren Qining was not afraid at all. He smiled and said, "Senior Murong, please don't be angry. Although my words are unpleasant to hear, Senior Murong can't deny that this is the truth. The Murong family is big and powerful. Naturally, there are not many people who are qualified to marry Miss Murong. Senior Murong must have understood young Master Qingchen's attitude these days. Pavilion Master Ling is probably standing on young Master Qingchen's side. Or, does Master Murong plan to marry Miss Murong to the Dechu state? With Murong Mingyan's status, she would at most be an imperial concubine after entering the palace. Not to mention the imperial concubine and the empress. The Dechu state did not lack money. The importance of the Murong family in Emperor Chu's eyes was questionable. At that time, he was afraid that he would suffer a double loss. The Murong family would lose their only daughter and their entire family business. "Do you think you are qualified to marry Mingyan?" Murong Xiong stared at him and said coldly. Ren Qining smiled and said, "Although I am not as rich as the Murong family, I still have some ability and family background." Murong Xiong snorted disdainfully. No matter in Jianghu, he had never heard of the name Ren Qining. There was no powerful family with the surname Ren. An unknown brat dared to be so arrogant. Ren Qining did not get angry when he saw Murong Xiong's contemptuous expression. He said with a smile, "Senior Murong, how about you give me some pointers?" Murong Xiong did not have time to ridicule Ren Qining for overestimating himself. He saw Ren Qining's sleeve move and a strong wind attack the Murong family's head. The Murong family's head did not practice martial arts. He was shocked by this sudden change and did not have time to dodge. Murong Mingyan, who was standing to the side, clenched her teeth and a dagger appeared in her hand. She stabbed it towards Ren Qining. Ren Qining smiled slightly. His fingers moved quickly and easily took the dagger from Murong Mingyan's hand. Although this move was exquisite, if young experts like Ling Taihan and Mo Xiaoyao were present, they might not be able to see through it. However, Murong Xiong was different. He was already the world's #1 expert 50 years ago. The things he had seen were naturally much more than Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan. Murong Xiong's face changed. He stared at Ren Qining and said, "Fleeting finger. Who are you to the Lin family?" Ren Qining slightly bowed and said with a smile, "Junior's surname is Lin and given name is Yuan. My grandfather's surname is Lin and given name is Fuqin. Senior must have heard of it. You are Lin Yuan. This is impossible. Lin Yuan is not." The Murong family's business was spread all over the world. Naturally, their sources of information were also spread all over the world. Murong Xiong had already noticed Lin Yuan. It could even be said that he had noticed him earlier than Mo Xiaoyao. However, the reason why he noticed Lin Yuan was different from Mo Xiaoyao and the others. Mo Xiaoyao and the rest of the world noticed Lin Yuan's identity as an orphan of the previous dynasty. Murong Xiong noticed him because he had a grandfather called Lin Fuqin. Lin Fuqin was a person who was rarely known in Jianghu. However, Murong Xiong remembered that he was a top expert like himself. It was just that Lin Fuqin had never really made a name for himself in Jianghu. Sometimes, Murong Xiong even doubted that if Lin Fuqin had fought for the title of top expert, he would not have been able to obtain the title of the world's #1 expert. Ren Qining's eyebrows flashed with a trace of disdain. Tan Jiji? Just a plaything that can't be shown in public. What is he? Chapter 551. When Mo Xiaoyao came out of the Murong family, Yili finally breathed a sigh of relief. The two left the Murong family. On the way, Mo Xiaoyao's brows were tightly knitted. He was obviously troubled. Xiaoyao, what happened? Yili asked softly. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and told her what he heard in the Murong family. He didn't hear much because he was afraid of Murong Xiong and didn't dare to get too close. But Murong Xiong's words, "You are Lin Yuan," were heard clearly. Perhaps Murong Xiong was conceited that his martial arts were unparalleled in the world, so he didn't suppress his voice. Yili was also surprised by this result. Ren Qining is a descendant of the previous dynasty's imperial family. Could it be that he and Tan Jiji are brothers? The two of them were close in age. The previous dynasty had been destroyed for 200 years. It would be strange if two orphans of the previous dynasty suddenly appeared at the same time. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. No, if they were brothers, they wouldn't both be called Lin Yuan. In addition, when Ren Qining talked about Tan Jiji, his tone was full of disdain. If they were biological brothers, even if they were dissatisfied, they wouldn't use that kind of tone. Ren Qining's attitude was clearly degrading Tan Jiji to the point that he was worse than a servant. It seems that we need to investigate this previous dynasty's imperial family. Yili smiled. Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement. Let's go. We'll go back and tell your big brother about this. After hearing the news brought by Mo Xiaoyao and Yili, young Master Qing Chen didn't panic. Seeing young Master Qing Chen's calm appearance, Prince Ding suddenly felt that he was meddling in other people's business. Yili looked at Su Qingchen worriedly. Big brother? Su Qingchen smiled. Don't worry. Ren Qining can't affect the overall situation. Mo Xiaoyao hugged Yili and rested his chin on her shoulder. He smiled. Ren Qining is full of confidence. Young Master Qingchen is unwilling to marry Miss Murong, but isn't there a descendant of the royal family who is willing to marry her? Su Qingchen casually knocked on the edge of the table, the smile on her lips like a tranquil pear blossom. Does Ren Qining have the ability to directly face the threat of Shilingde Chu State and Yanwang Chamber of Commerce? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows, clearly wanting to go against him. What if he does? Su Qingchen raised his eyelids and said indifferently, if he has the ability, he can just raise the banner of reviving the country. Why must you marry Murong Mingyan? Mo Xiaoyao rubbed his nose helplessly. It was so boring talking to smart people. What do you think he'll do? Su Qingchen said, move the Murong family's businesses as soon as possible. Save as many as you can. Yili said, will Murong Xiong accept this result? Murong Xiong's temperament seemed to be that of an old man's. How could he accept this result? Even if the Murong family was saved, a few layers of skin would be scraped off. Su Qingchen said, Ren Qining isn't a god. If the Murong family doesn't want to be annihilated, they can only accept his proposal. This person. Although he's not a concern this time, Prince. We probably have to pay more attention to this person in the future. This one has a premonition that this person is 10 times, 100 times more troublesome than Tan Jiji. Mo Xiaoyao had never really taken Tan Jiji seriously. Moreover, now that Princess Anqi had ascended the throne and Shu Manlin had been killed, Tan Jiji was probably hiding somewhere like a drowning dog. However, since even Su Qingchen had taken notice of this person, Mo Xiuyao naturally wouldn't make a small mistake. Mo Xiuyao lowered his eyebrows and thought for a while. He frowned and said, "We've also sent people to investigate Dechu State, Xiling, and even Nanzhao. We couldn't find anything about this Ren Qining. It's as if this person appeared out of thin air. Since he's so confident that he can save the Murong family, he must have a lot of power under him. How could we not find anything?" Yili thought for a while and said, "If it's not that we didn't investigate thoroughly, then, he's not even in the territory we investigated." Mo Xiuyao was startled. Not in Dechu State or Xiling. Could it be the northern tribes? No, the northern tribes are xenophobic by nature. Moreover, it's very difficult for people from the Central Plains to survive outside the pass. Then, there was a moment of silence in the room. The three of them looked at each other and said in unison, "The northeast." The northeast of Dechu State was also called the Barbarian Land like the other borders. The people of the Central Plains called it the Northern Territory. Originally, many small tribes gathered there and fought among themselves. The Dechu State had no interest in interfering, and the northern tribes had no ability to interfere. The terrain of the Northern Territory wasn't like the flat plains of the northern tribes. Instead, it was covered with mountains and forests. Ever since the Prince Ding Mansion broke away from the Dechu State, the various barbarian tribes in the Northern Territory seemed to have gradually united. They even began to encroach on the borders of the Dechu State. If it was in the past, Mo Xiuyao would have already set his sights on that area. However, ever since he broke off all ties with the Dechu State, Mo Xiuyao naturally paid more attention to the northwest and the borders of the surrounding countries. He didn't want to care about the Dechu State anymore. "Go investigate," Mo Xiuyao said in a low voice. "Your subordinate obeys." Someone in the dark responded. Mo Xiuyao's face was gloomy. "If Ren Qining dares to lead the barbarians into the pass, I want him to die without any descendants." No matter what opinions Mo Xiuyao had about the Dechu State, or even if the Dechu State immediately changed dynasties, it had nothing to do with him. However, the prerequisite was that the people changing dynasties were from the Central Plains. Generations of education had ingrained in people's bones a rejection of the other races beyond the Great Wall. As the saying went, those who were not of the same race were bound to have different hearts. If the people of the Central Plains were to become the emperor, the people would happily live their own lives. However, if it was a different race, it would be completely different. Yili gently patted Mo Xiuyao's arm. Mo Xiuyao's gloomy expression gradually eased. He looked at Su Qingchen and smiled apologetically. "I forgot myself. Brother Su, please don't take offense." Su Qingchen smiled faintly. "Prince, you're exaggerating. I'm not too happy either." Su Qingchen had received traditional education from a young age. He was even more repulsed by the other races than Mo Xiuyao. As a result, the Su family never intermarried with other races. Even when he was friends with Princess Anxi, Su Qingchen never hesitated when it was time to act. "Should we inform the Dechu State about this?" Su Qingchen looked at Mo Xiuyao and asked hesitantly. Mo Xiuyao snorted softly. "Send someone to inform that idiot Mo Jingqi. Whether he believes it or not is none of I's business." Su Qingchen nodded in agreement. "Since young Master Ren is so confident, I'd like to see how fast he can act. Someone, inform Crown Prince Genom of Gojoseon and Pavilion Master Ling that will act tomorrow." Su Qingchen smiled coldly. "Yes, sir." Once they shed all pretense of cordiality and acted, they would naturally act very quickly. Genom of Gojoseon's order to seal up all the shops of the Murong family in West Hill. Originally, Genom of Gojoseon did not agree to it. In this way, the West Hills economy and people's livelihood would inevitably be greatly affected. However, young Master Qingchen said with a smile, "So your highness wants to see Ren Qining empty the entire Murong family before taking action?" Genom of Gojosian had no choice but to accept young Master Qingqian's suggestion to act in advance. If Ren Qining was really a descendant of the previous dynasty, the Dechu state and the Prince Ding mansion would not be the only ones who had a grudge against Ren Qining. Back when the previous dynasty destroyed West Hill, they also had a hand in it. Chapter 552. Su Qingqian. Outside the Murong family's gate, Murong Xiong and Master Murong stared at the fairy-like man in front of them. Murong Mingyan's eyes were filled with hidden bitterness. Su Qingqian smiled gently and politely. He looked at the people in front of him and cupped his hands. Senior Murong, Master Ren. Ren Qining's face was gloomy. He had secretly made a lot of arrangements these days, but he didn't expect Su Qingqian to act so quickly. He glanced at Jack Hennam of Gojosian and Ling Taihan standing next to Su Qingqian and smiled. Master Qingqian is indeed extraordinary. I heard that Pavilion Master Ling and Jack Hennam of Gojosian have some grudges. I didn't expect them to stand together today. It must be because of Master Qingqian. Su Qingqian smiled and said, the world is bustling for profit, and the world is bustling for profit. Master Ren, you must be joking. Su Qingqian was very straightforward. It was clear that they had their eyes on the Murong family's wealth. What are you going to do? Master Murong stepped forward and pointed at Su Qingqian. Master Qingqian, the Murong family has treated you well. Aren't you afraid of being punished by the heavens for doing this? Su Qingqian sighed helplessly. Master Murong, please forgive me. Although I have a deep relationship with the Prince Ding mansion, there is no reason for me to sell my body for the Prince Ding mansion. However, if the Northwest is in trouble because of this, it is my fault. Therefore, I have no choice. I hope Master Murong can forgive me. Master Murong was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. He looked like he was about to vomit blood. Ling Taihan and Lei Tengfeng couldn't help but lower their heads and laugh. They all knew the cause and effect of the matter. Su Qingqian's words were very gentle and pleasant to the ears, but in the ears of Ling Taihan and Lei Tengfeng, it was, I don't want to marry your granddaughter, but you insist that I marry her. If I don't marry you, I will stop the Northwest's business. I have no choice but to destroy your Murong family. How dare you? Murong Xiong roared and flew towards Su Qingqian, who was standing at the front. This time, Murong Xiong was originally full of confidence when he returned to Jianghu. With his reputation and martial arts, he should have been respected and obeyed by everyone. To be able to catch his eye and marry into the Murong family was naturally a great favor and charity, but he did not expect to meet Su Qingqian, who did not know how to appreciate favors. Now, not only had the marriage failed, even the Murong family was in imminent danger. Ling Taihan and Genom of Gojosian's expressions changed. They both stepped in front of Su Qingqian and struck out with their palms. The shadow guard behind Su Qingqian had already pulled Su Qingqian back a dozen steps. The palms of the three people collided, and strong winds immediately spread out. The people standing around couldn't take it anymore and retreated. Ling Taihan and Genom of Gojosian each took 2 steps back and looked at Murong Xiong, who had fallen to the ground. Ling Taihan sneered, Senior Murong's name has been known for decades. Is it considered skill to attack someone who doesn't know martial arts? The title of the world's #1 expert isn't just an empty title, is it? How dare you? Murong Xiong roared and did not hesitate to strike out at Ling Taihan. Ling Taihan did not know that his words had poked at Murong Xiong's sore spot. Although he had won the title of the world's #1 expert, he did not have the slightest confidence in defeating Ren Qining's grandfather, Lin Fuqin. It was just that Lin Fuqin did not fight with him and did not compete with him. Now that he heard Ling Taihan's words, it was as if he knew the truth of the past and could mock him. In fact, Murong Xiong was thinking too much. Even if Ling Taihan was ranked as one of the world's top 4 experts, he knew that there would always be someone stronger than him. In this Jianghu, there might not be no one stronger than him. The world's #1 expert was not to be trifled with. Even if Ling Taihan's martial arts had improved after his fight with Mo Xiaoyao a few days ago, he still had no chance of winning against Murong Xiong. Compared to Ling Taihan, who was being watched closely by Murong Xiong, Genom of Gojoseon was much more relaxed. He even had the time to ponder over Ling Taihan and Murong Xiong's martial arts moves. Leng Luyue and sickly scholar, who were watching from the side, saw that Ling Taihan was in a tough battle and could not help but feel anxious. Leng Luyue raised her sword and wanted to rush up to help. Su Qingchen, who was standing beside her, stopped her. Pavilion Master Leng, it's useless for you to go up now. In this kind of battle between experts, if one was not an expert of the same level, one would only be cannon fodder. Glancing at Genom of Gojoseon who was watching from the side, Su Qingchen said in a clear voice, "Prince, can you defeat Senior Murong by yourself?" Genom of Gojoseon was startled and his heart trembled. Only then did he rush up and join the battle between Ling Taihan and Murong Xiong. That's right, he had a grudge with Ling Taihan. If he could let Murong Xiong kill Ling Taihan and then kill Su Qingchen, that would be the best. But unfortunately, once Ling Taihan died, he would become Murong Xiong's next opponent. Since that was the case, he might as well get rid of the biggest threat first. The grudge between him and Ling Taihan wasn't something that happened in just 1 or 2 years. Wasn't everyone still living peacefully? With Genom of Gojoseon joining the battle, Ling Taihan immediately let out a sigh of relief. The two of them working together to fight Murong Xiong was considered to be evenly matched. On the side, Ren Qining's expression was gloomy. He glanced at the people on the battlefield and also jumped into the battle. This time, without Su Qingchen's reminder, Leng Luyue and Lei Tingfeng acted at the same time and restrained Ren Qining. As a result, all the important people present had already acted. Murong clan and Ren Qining's people also rushed out under the Murong clan's signal. The Yanwang Chamber of Commerce and Genom of Gojoseon's gold-robed guards behind Su Qingchen also stepped forward. They didn't want to show any weakness and engaged in close combat. The Murong clan was instantly filled with blood. "Why are you doing this to me?" Murong Mingyan looked at the chaos in front of her and walked step by step towards Su Qingchen. Her martial arts weren't very strong, but she wasn't weak either. Along the way, the people on both sides didn't really attack her. She actually rushed to Su Qingchen just like that. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and looked at her calmly. "Miss Murong, this one said that you and I aren't suitable. Miss Murong shouldn't force me." Murong Mingyan said with tears in her eyes. So I forced you to marry me, and you destroyed my family?" Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen, everyone says that young Master Qingchen is gentle and refined. It turns out that you're actually so ruthless. Su Qingchen smiled. "I'm sorry to disappoint Miss Murong. Su Qingchen is not a deity. Moreover, who said that deities weren't heartless? People worship them, but who had ever seen a deity show mercy? If that's the case, then die." Murong Mingyan's expression changed and she said sternly. A cold light appeared in her hand, and a dagger stabbed towards Su Qingchen's chest. Su Qingchen's expression was calm. Even his gaze didn't change. He calmly watched as the dagger stopped a few inches away from his chest. Murong Mingyan closed her eyes and fell to the ground. The shadow guard standing beside Su Qingchen had a calm expression. He respectfully reported, "She's not dead." Su Qingchen lowered his head and glanced at Murong Mingyan, who had fainted on the ground. He nodded. The people beside him went forward and dragged her to the side. Leng Luyue and Lei Tingfeng's martial arts weren't bad, but they were far from being a match for Ren Qining, who had won first place in the martial arts tournament. After a while, Lei Tingfeng was the first to be kicked out. Without Lei Tingfeng, Leng Luyue naturally couldn't do anything by herself. Originally, she wasn't good at swordsmanship. Instead, she was good at qinggong and hidden weapons. After a few rounds, she was forced to the point where she couldn't use her skills. Sickly Scholar stood on the side and watched the two people fight. He hated himself for being unable to do anything because his martial arts weren't good enough. At that moment, Leng Luyue and Ren Qining were too close. He couldn't even use poison to help Leng Luyue. The Yanwang Chamber's specialty was assassination. If they fought face to face, they would be at a disadvantage. Su Qingchen looked at the situation in front of him and frowned. With a wave of his hand, four black shadows rushed over and surrounded Ren Qining. Leng Luyue took the opportunity to retreat from the battle. Once these four people joined in, the situation immediately turned around. In terms of martial arts, none of them could compare to Ren Qining. In fact, they couldn't even compare to Leng Luyue. However, when they attacked at the same time, their attacks were direct and without any fancy moves. They coordinated perfectly as if they had practiced thousands of times. It immediately made Ren Qining a little flustered. Leng Luyue coughed lightly and wiped away the blood on her lips. She praised, Prince Ding Mansion's Qi Lin really lives up to his reputation. Leng Luyue had also dealt with the Prince Ding Mansion's shadow guard before. Naturally, she could see that these four people were completely different from the shadow guard. She casually thought about it and figured out the identity of these people. Su Qingchen was also very satisfied. Li was right. If they could take down Mu Qingsong, one of the four masters in the world, it wouldn't be difficult to take down Ren Qining. Ren Qining's side couldn't be finished in a short time. Everyone's eyes turned to Murong Xiong's side. Leng Luyue and Sickly Scholar had seen the fight between Ling Taihan and Mo Xiaoyao a few days ago. Looking at the three people fighting in front of them, it wasn't as exciting as the fight between Ling Taihan and Mo Xiaoyao that day. Although they couldn't see the moves clearly, they could clearly feel the sword chi and fighting spirit. However, the three people in front of them didn't move quickly. At least they could see it clearly. Their moves weren't exquisite, but when they fought, their palms hit the flesh. Their sword chi was everywhere. This was a fighting style that wanted to kill people. Ling Taihan and Genom of Gojoseon had a knot in their hearts. Therefore, the two of them didn't have good teamwork. With Murong Xiong's rich experience, how could he not see it? He found an opportunity to take advantage of a loophole. First, he sent Ling Taihan flying with one palm. Then, he focused on dealing with Genom of Gojoseon. Genom of Gojoseon couldn't last more than 100 or 200 moves before he was defeated. Murong Xiong looked coldly at Ling Taihan and Genom of Gojoseon, one sitting and one standing, both injured. He sneered, "Two juniors want to compete with your father." Ling Taihan looked at him coldly. Their injuries weren't light, but Murong Xiong wasn't unharmed either. It was just that his injuries weren't heavy compared to theirs. Murong Xiong didn't care about Ren Qining's side. Instead, he looked at Su Qingchen and sneered, "Surnamed Su, what do you think now? You want to rely on these two brats to destroy my Murong family? You're being too whimsical." Su Qingchen wasn't in a hurry. He smiled faintly and said, "Senior's martial arts are indeed superior to my expectations. But, Senior, do you think that the Murong family can still survive? Can the Murong family be stronger than Genom of Gojoseon's 3,000 gold-clad guards or Shiling's million-strong army?" Murong Xiong's expression changed. "Before the gold-clad guards and the million-strong army arrive, all of you will die." Ling Taihan smiled and said, "I wonder who will die." "Senior Murong, you're old and should cultivate your character. You're meddling in other people's business." Murong Xiong stared at Ling Taihan and sneered. Genom of Gojoseon looked at Ling Taihan and then at Su Qingchen thoughtfully. Murong Xiong raised his head and laughed. He pointed at Su Qingchen and said, "I'd like to see how the world-famous Mr. Qingchen will save his own life." Murong Xiong took a step forward and easily avoided Ling Taihan and Genom of Gojoseon. He then pounced towards Su Qingchen. No matter what, Su Qingchen would not be able to dodge this attack. Not to mention Su Qingchen, even the shadow guards in front of Su Qingchen, including Leng Luyue and the others, found it difficult to even move their bodies under this overwhelming pressure. Ling Taihan's expression changed. Qingchen. A white figure shot out from behind like a startled swan. A ray of sword light instantly pierced through the sky. The biting cold sword qi seemed to have materialized as it slashed down from the sky. Leng Luyue and the rest immediately felt their bodies lighten as they hurriedly retreated. Su Qingchen was also brought further away by the two secret guards. Where Su Qingchen had been standing was now a tall and straight white figure. His hair was as white as snow and the sword in his hand was also shining with a cold light. Mo Xiaoyao. Chapter 553. Murong Xiong was shocked and angry. Although he had never seen Mo Xiaoyao before, he knew that Prince Ding had a head of white hair. Moreover, there were only a handful of people in the world who could block his full-strength attack. Other than Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao could not possibly be this white-haired man. Genom of Gojoseon looked at the white-clothed man standing in front of him with a complicated expression. However, he had to admit that Mo Xiaoyao's sudden appearance made him secretly relieved. He turned to look at Su Qingchen and said, "Young Master Qingchen, you have a good plan." To be able to arrive so coincidentally, Mo Xiaoyao definitely did not just arrive in an city. However, he did not appear in front of everyone. Clearly, he was a hidden card left behind by Su Qingchen. No wonder Su Qingchen dared to provoke the #1 expert in the world despite his lack of strength. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and did not reply. Genom of Gojoseon saw this and turned to Mo Xiaoyao. "Prince Ding is quite timely. Wouldn't it have been better if he had arrived a little later and caused both sides to suffer?" Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "Just now, there were over 100 experts coming this way. It took some time and we were almost late. I'm very sorry." Only then did everyone notice that Mo Xiaoyao's white clothes were stained with blood. The blood had not turned black yet. It was obvious that it had been stained not long ago. Ren Qining, who was still fighting with 4 Qilin guards, heard Mo Xiaoyao's words and her expression changed. Her arm was almost cut off. "It's good that you're here." Ling Taihan stood up and said. Su Qingchen frowned. "Many people came." He knew that Ren Qining must have other plans. That was why he asked Mo Xiaoyao to cut off the road to the Murong family. A few hundred guards were still manageable. However, for Mo Xiaoyao to call them experts, they must not be simple. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "Don't worry. Li Li and Mo Jingli are handling it. I came over first to take a look. Young Master Ren, why don't you stop?" Ren Qining frowned and flew out of the battle circle. Just now, he knew that although these people looked ordinary, they were very difficult to deal with. If he had Murong Xiong's ability to kill in one hit, he wouldn't have to worry. But if he didn't, he could only be entangled by them and slowly exhaust his internal energy until he was defeated. As soon as he retreated, the 4 Qilin did not chase after him. Instead, they all retreated to Su Qingchen's side and protected her. Ren Qining looked around and said with a bitter smile, "This one has eyes but cannot see. I have met many times and did not recognize Prince Ding and Wang Fei. This defeat is not undeserved." These words confirmed that Mo Xiaoyao had indeed arrived in an city a long time ago. Mo Xiaoyao smiled without any sincerity and nodded slightly. "I originally just wanted to walk around and join in the fun. I didn't expect young Master Ren to make I feel so surprised and could only stay for a few more days. Isn't today's matter a coincidence? So, if you didn't act smart and send people to follow me, I would have left long ago. So today's defeat is also because you asked for it." Ren Qining understood the meaning behind Mo Xiaoyao's words and his face became even uglier. "You are Prince Ding?" Murong Xiong stared at Mo Xiaoyao and asked in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and said proudly, "That is I." Murong Xiong could be considered a figure in Jianghu, but the Prince Ding mansion had never lacked geniuses. Every generation of Prince Ding was a stunning figure. How could Mo Xiaoyao pay attention to someone like Murong Xiong who didn't know anything other than martial arts? Murong Xiong sneered, "What a good Prince Ding. This old man wants to see what kind of ability you have." The sword in Mo Xiaoyao's hand trembled and he smiled faintly, "Why don't you try? Pavilion Master Ling, can you still move?" While they were talking, Ling Taihan and Genom of Gojoseon took the opportunity to adjust their breathing. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, they immediately moved their feet. The three of them formed a triangle around Murong Xiong. At this time, no one wanted to overestimate themselves and fight Murong Xiong one-on-one. Moreover, apart from Ling Taihan, the other two weren't people of Jianghu. Naturally, they couldn't be expected to follow the rules of Jianghu. Killing the opponent was the most important thing. Ren Qining suddenly intervened and stood in front of Genom of Gojoseon. He smiled and said, "The three of you, it's fine if it's 2 against 1, but 3 against 1 is unsightly. Why don't I experience a few moves from Genom of Gojoseon?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled, "Young Master Ren, please do as you wish." After saying this, he didn't pay attention to the others and waved his sword. A biting cold light flashed towards Murong Xiong. Ling Taihan didn't hold back either. He waved his sword and sword chi surged. The two of them worked together much better than Genom of Gojoseon. Even Murong Xiong wasn't as relaxed as he was. On the other side, Ren Qining naturally began to fight with Genom of Gojoseon. On the road to the Murong clan, there was also a bloody and chaotic battle. One side of the battle wore the clothes of ordinary people and used all kinds of weapons. However, each of them had extraordinary skills. On the other side, Mo Jingli's bodyguards were faintly unable to stop them. Mo Jingli swung his sword and killed an enemy. He felt a strong wind coming from behind his head and hurriedly wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Just as he saw a long sword stabbing towards his chest, a white shadow flitted past. The sword that was hurriedly stabbing towards his chest paused. Mo Jingli quickly dodged, and when he turned back, he saw that the person had fallen to the ground. Not far away, the plain-clothed woman was graceful, but her methods were swift and fierce. Her moves were simple and clear. In the blink of an eye, there were 3 or 4 corpses lying in front of her. Mo Jingli was stunned. He looked at Yili with a complicated expression. Yili slashed a person's neck with her sword. When she turned around, she saw Mo Jingli standing behind her and looking at her in a daze. She couldn't help but frown and say, "Your Highness Princely, how can you be distracted even on the battlefield?" Only then did Mo Jingli come back to his senses. He looked at Yili strangely and said, "How can you be like this?" Yili was speechless and rolled her eyes at the sky. She couldn't understand what Mo Jingli wanted to say. She turned around and the dagger in her hand flashed coldly. She cut off an enemy's wrist, but Mo Jingli pulled her back again. Yili frowned. She looked angrily at Mo Jingli and said angrily, "What do you want to do?" On the side, the shadow guard and Qi Lin of the Prince Ding mansion saw their Wang Fei being held back by Prince Li and approached Yili with interest. They separated the enemies around the two. Yili saw the situation and took a deep breath. She pushed aside Mo Jingli's hand and said in a deep voice, "Prince Li, if you have something to say, can't you wait until after this is over?" Mo Jingli looked at her and was silent inside. "When this is over, can I find you to talk to?" Mo Jingli had never thought that he, as a prince, needed to charge into battle like a normal soldier. So when his subordinates were still fighting, he didn't feel any shame in standing here and gossiping. Mo Jingli stared at Yili and said, "You never told me that you were so skilled." Yili heard the hidden condemnation and rolled her eyes. She really had enough of Mo Jingli's old words. It was as though every time they met, he would bring up the same topic. It was as though she had wronged him. "What does my skills have to do with you, Prince?" During the time the two were facing off, the people of the Prince Ding mansion and Prince Li worked together to finish off their opponents. Yi Li was too lazy to pay attention to Mo Jingli, who was going crazy. She turned and headed back to the Murong family. Chapter 554. Before she could turn around, she saw a group of people approaching. Yi Li couldn't help but frown. Ren Qining couldn't have hidden so many people near An City without anyone noticing. Mo Jingli glanced at them and said, "It's Imperial brother." It was indeed Mo Jingqi and his group of highly skilled guards. Yi Li frowned. They didn't bring many people with them this time, so they chose to work with Mo Jingli to intercept Ren Qining's people. Of course, this was because Mo Jingli had taken advantage of many of the Murong family's businesses in Dechu State. On the other hand, although Mo Jingli wasn't a reliable person, Yi Li still felt that this person had a bottom line compared to the sometimes calm and sometimes crazy Mo Jingqi. She didn't expect that Mo Jingqi, who cherished his life so much, didn't leave when An City was obviously in chaos. Instead, he brought people to the Murong family. What is he doing here now? Mo Jingli laughed coldly. What else can I do? Naturally, he's here to loot a burning house. Yi Li smiled coldly. Loot a burning house? Who can he rob? As they spoke, Mo Jingqi had already walked in with his people. When he saw Mo Jingli, his originally smiling face became gloomy and distorted when he saw Yi Li. Princess Ding? Why are you here? Yi Li smiled faintly. An City is Shiling's territory. The people of Shiling have never said that they don't want me here. Why can't I be here? Mo Jingqi's eyes were probing. Since Princess Ding is here, then Prince Ding is naturally here too. Yi Li smiled and said, "Does Emperor Chu want to have tea with our prince?" Mo Jingqi looked at Yi Li and the guards beside her. His eyes flashed and he turned to Mo Jingli and asked, "Why is Imperial brother here?" Mo Jingli solemnly said, "I came to join in the fun and happened to run into Princess Ding." "Isn't Imperial brother here as well?" Mo Jingqi said, "Is that so?" From his tone, it was clear that he did not believe Mo Jingli's explanation. Mo Jingli knew that Mo Jingqi was suspecting that he might be in cahoots with Mo Xiuyao. He didn't explain, nodding and saying seriously, "Yes. I have to go to the Murong family first. If Prince Li and Emperor Chu still have things to say, I will take my leave first." Yi Li smiled faintly. Mo Jingli said, "I also have to go to the Murong family. Let's go to Ba together." "Imperial brother." Mo Jingqi said in a low voice, "Of course I have to go and take a look." As he said this, his gaze kept lingering on Yi Li. Yi Li didn't care and walked casually beside Mo Jingli. She didn't care about Mo Jingqi's expression and talked with Mo Jingli as they walked towards the Murong family. Mo Jingqi walked alone on the other side, his gaze sweeping over the two of them was dark and cold, causing them to tremble in fear. Yi Li glanced indifferently at Mo Jingqi, who was staring at her from time to time. She obviously knew what Mo Jingqi was thinking. He was thinking about whether or not he could use her to threaten Mo Xiuyao. Unfortunately, she wouldn't give him the chance. She glanced at Mo Jingli, who was only a step away from her. If Mo Jingqi wanted to make a move, Mo Jingli and his bodyguards would become her best shields. Furthermore, with Mo Jingqi's personality, he wouldn't dare to make a move before he knew which side Mo Jingli was on. When they arrived at the Murong family, the large-scale battle had already ended. In the open space in front of the Murong family's gate, only Mo Xiuyao and a few others were fighting fiercely. Powerful sword qi and palm qi flew in all directions, smashing the surrounding trees and even the eaves. It was a complete mess. "Big brother." Yi Li walked to Su Qingqian's side and said softly. Su Qingqian glanced at Mo Jingli and Mo Jingqi who were following behind Yi Li, then looked at the blood that had accidentally splattered on her body. He couldn't help but sigh. After carefully sizing up Yi Li, he asked softly, "Is Li her injured?" Yi Li shook her head and said, "Big brother, don't worry. isn't injured. How long have they been fighting? Su Qingchen muttered to himself for a moment, then frowned and said, "It's been 2 hours." Yi Li said, "Xiaoyao has also met Murong Xiong before. Since he said that he and Pavilion Master Ling can deal with Murong Xiong together, there shouldn't be any problems. However, we have to prevent Genom of Gojoseon from taking advantage of the situation after the battle." Su Qingchen nodded and smiled, "I also have the same thoughts. So, let Genom of Gojoseon and Ren Qining fight for a while longer." Genom of Gojoseon had already been injured when he fought with Murong Xiong before, and his injuries were even more serious than Ling Taihan's. If he fought with Ren Qining again, his vitality would be greatly damaged, and he wouldn't have the energy to do anything else. Therefore, Su Qingchen watched the battle for a long time and didn't have the slightest intention of asking Qi Lin to help Genom of Gojoseon. Mo Xiaoyao still couldn't see it, but the battle between Ren Qining and Genom of Gojoseon was about to end. As Su Qingchen and Yi Li spoke, the two of them simultaneously sent out a palm strike with all their strength. Then, they both retreated 7 or 8 steps before stabilizing their bodies. Ren Qining's face was pale. He furrowed his brows and finally spat out a mouthful of blood. Even though Genom of Gojoseon didn't spit out blood, there was a trickle of blood at the corner of his lips, and his body swayed. Lei Tengfeng hurriedly went forward to support him. Ren Qining and Genom of Gojoseon were almost 20 years apart in age. Even though Genom of Gojoseon was injured first, it was enough for Ren Qining to be proud that the two of them were able to fight to a draw. "Fu Wang, how are you?" Lei Tengfeng supported Genom of Gojoseon and asked with concern. Genom of Gojoseon waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. He raised his head to look at Ren Qining and said, "Ren Gongzi is very skilled." Ren Qining's injuries weren't light either. He forced a smile and said, "Prince overpraises me." He glanced to the side and saw Yi Li standing next to Su Qingchen. He grimaced helplessly and said, "This one was blind and didn't recognize Prince Ding and Wang Fei. This time, I've really been busy." That was why it was said that it wasn't good to be too shallow. It wasn't good to be too mysterious. If one didn't want to be understood by others, if one hid too deeply, they would lose the opportunity to interact with others. If it was Lei Tengfeng, Mo Jingli, or Tan Jiji, if they encountered Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li on the road, even if they didn't recognize them on the spot, they would still be able to recognize them if they thought about it carefully. After all, the art of disguise wasn't so good that it could change a person's appearance completely. But it was a pity that Ren Qining had never seen Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li before. Even if he had seen pictures of them, the pictures in this era were very abstract and freehand. If they weren't wearing the same clothes, he probably wouldn't have recognized them even if he saw them face to face. If Ren Qining had known that the people he encountered were Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li, he definitely wouldn't have underestimated them and acted so carelessly. Yi Li didn't feel anything towards Ren Qining's frustration. She smiled and said, "Gongzi is too polite. This consort and prince didn't think that we would meet someone like Gongzi. It's an honor to meet you. Lin Gongzi." Ren Qining's eyes narrowed and he stared closely at Yi Li. He smiled faintly and turned his gaze towards Mo Xiaoyao and the others who were still fighting. At this time, the fight had already reached its most critical point. The spectators couldn't help but hold their breaths. Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan looked at each other and stood up at the same time. One in front and one behind, they stabbed towards Murong Xiong. Murong Xiong was pincered by the two of them and was also under great pressure. Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan working together was several times more difficult to deal with than Genom of Gojoseon. Both of them used swords. Ling Taihan's swordsmanship was steady and wide, with the style of a great master. Mo Xiaoyao's swordsmanship was swift and fierce. His sword moved from the side, making people unable to avoid him. Even Murong Xiong couldn't help but admit that these two people were heavenly geniuses. If they were in the same era as him, their achievements would be even greater than his. More importantly, when the two of them were fighting, when one of them attacked with all his strength, the other would take the opportunity to rest and vice versa. Murong Xiong knew that they wanted to prolong the fight to exhaust his martial arts, but he couldn't break through the situation. When the two swords stabbed towards him, Murong Xiong already felt a trace of fatigue. However, he wasn't willing to let these two arrogant juniors go. He leaned to one side and separated his palms to attack the two of them. Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan clenched their teeth. Instead of retreating, they advanced and stabbed their swords towards Murong Xiong without any hesitation. Of course, Murong Xiong's two palms also landed on their bodies. The two of them were sent flying at the same time. Even their swords fell from their hands. Xiaoyao! Big brother! Yi Li and Leng Luyue exclaimed at the same time. They flew forward to support Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan who had fallen. They couldn't see clearly because of the fight from afar. Now, they saw that Mo Xiaoyao was covered in sweat. Even his silver hair was wet. Ling Taihan's face was also pale. The back of his blue robe was completely dyed dark blue. The hand that was holding the sword was also trembling slightly. Yi Li repeatedly called out, Xiaoyao, Xiaoyao, how are you? Mo Xiaoyao took a breath and then smiled at Yi Li comfortingly, I'm fine. My sword stabbed him first. If it wasn't for the fact that Murong Xiong had lost a lot of internal energy, the two of them would have been injured even more. At least Mo Xiaoyao still had the energy to provoke Ling Taihan, last time you won. This time I won. Ling Taihan helplessly smiled, this time you won. Everyone looked at Murong Xiong who had also fallen to the ground. His injuries were much worse than Mo Xiaoyao's and Ling Taihan's. Mo Xiaoyao's sword had directly pierced through his chest. Ling Taihan's sword had also slashed across his waist. His entire upper body was dyed dark red with blood. Yi Li saw clearly that Mo Xiaoyao's sword had directly pierced through his heart. It was already very shocking that Murong Xiong was still breathing, but it was clear that he wouldn't be able to survive. Thinking about how if Mo Xiaoyao's sword hadn't pierced through Murong Xiong's heart, even if Murong Xiong was killed by Ling Taihan, his injuries would have been even worse. After that, even if Murong Xiong didn't have the strength to kill the two of them, killing one of them would be more than enough. Thinking of this, Yi Li couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. However, what Yi Li didn't know was that Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan had been forced to take such a risk. The two of them had indeed planned to first exhaust Murong Xiong's internal energy and then kill him. However, Murong Xiong's internal energy was more profound than theirs by nearly 50 years. Murong Xiong had consumed a lot of his internal energy, but the two of them had consumed a lot more. If they couldn't kill him in one blow, who knew who would be the one to wear out who in the end? Murong Xiong couldn't stop coughing. Blood had already spilled out of his mouth. He stared unwillingly at Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan and sternly said, Good. Good Prince Ding. Good Yanwang Chamber's Lord. I didn't think this old man would actually. The unparalleled expert of the past had actually died at the hands of two juniors. Before Murong Xiong could finish what he wanted to say, he died with his eyes wide open. He died with his eyes wide open. Everyone present was silent. Murong Xiong could be said to be one of the strongest martial artists in the world today. The decline of a generation of experts always made people feel a bit sad. Ren Qining, who was standing on the side, couldn't help but change his expression. He suddenly jumped towards Murong Xiong who was hiding in the corner. Under everyone's gaze, he didn't hesitate to cut Murong Xiong's throat with his sword. Murong Xiong hadn't recovered from his uncle's death before he also lost his life. After killing Murong Xiong, Ren Qining's expression became better. He smiled at Mo Xiaoyao and Genom of Gojoseon and said, Prince Ding, Genom of Gojoseon, how do the two of you plan to obtain Murong Xiong's property? Genom of Gojoseon frowned and said, What does young master mean? Su Qingchen sighed somewhat helplessly. Presumably, the real gold and silver accumulated by Murong Xiong for dozens of generations is already in young Master Ren's hands, right? Murong Xiong couldn't touch the shops, trade routes, and farmland of Murong Xiong. What was left was the countless gold and silver accumulated by dozens of generations. Ren Qining smiled and said, "Young Master Qingchen is really wise. Speaking of which, this one is lucky. If it wasn't for this, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to leave in city alive today." After killing Murong Xiong, only he knew the whereabouts of these treasures. This was his protective talisman. Chapter 555. Prince Ding, Genom of Gojoseon, how do the two of you plan to obtain the Murong family's property? Faced with this sudden change, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Genom of Gojoseon pushed away Lei Tengfeng's hand and coldly stared at Ren Qining. What does young Master Ren want to do? For the sake of the Murong family, the price and energy he spent far exceeded that of Mo Xiuyao and Su Qingchen. Therefore, he couldn't tolerate the cooked duck flying away like this. Mo Xiuyao was still lying on the ground, unable to get up. He leaned his head against Yi Li's chest and lazily looked at Ren Qining. I already said that I only came to join in the fun, so I really did come to join in the fun. The matter of the Murong family's property, I don't have the final say. Ah. Murong Xiong, that old fellow is very powerful. Li, your husband's injury is very serious. Seeing his pale face but smiling at her as usual, Yi Li's heart ached. Is it very painful? Let's immediately go back and call a doctor. Although Mo Xiuyao said that he was seriously injured, other than Ling Taihan, no one really thought that he was seriously injured. Looking at the person half lying on the ground, the vigilance in their eyes became even stronger. Hearing Mo Xiuyao's words, Ren Qining raised her eyebrows and looked at Su Qingchen. She smiled and said, "Then what does young Master Qingchen say?" Su Qingchen looked down and indifferently smiled. The Murong family doesn't belong to the Prince Ding mansion. At most, it can be considered a windfall. Don't look at the blood flowing like a river this time. In fact, other than Mo Xiuyao receiving an unknown injury, the Prince Ding mansion didn't suffer any losses. The people who took action were either Genom of Gojoseon, Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, or Mo Jingli's men. The Prince Ding mansion did not bring many people, so the number of sacrifices was naturally limited. Moreover, even if they didn't have anything else, at least all of the Murong family's properties in the northwest and half of the Dechu state's properties had been taken over by the Prince Ding mansion. Even if they couldn't get the remaining property, the Prince Ding mansion wouldn't suffer a loss. Hearing this, Ren Qining's face darkened. He smiled faintly and said, "I remember that I have never offended young Master Qingchen or the Prince Ding mansion. Can't we part on good terms?" His biggest bargaining chip now was the Murong family's wealth, but if the Prince Ding mansion wasn't interested in this, then his chance to escape. Moreover, even if young Master Qingchen isn't interested, I wonder if Genom of Gojoseon, Pavilion Master Ling, Emperor Chu, and Prince Li are also not interested? Ren Qining's gaze turned to the others. He smiled and said, "Speaking of which, it's a coincidence that you are a little late. The Murong family is indeed a century-old family with wealth comparable to that of a country. I'm afraid that the combined wealth of the West Hill and the Dechu state's national treasuries can't compare." As expected, the others' expressions changed slightly. Ling Taihan was still fine. He held Ling Luyue and sickly scholar's hands and stood up. He glanced at Su Qingchen and said, "Whatever young Master Qingchen means, I mean it." "Genom of Gojoseon, what do you say?" Su Qingchen asked. Genom of Gojoseon hesitated for a moment and said, "Speaking of which, young Master Ren has nothing to do with the West Hill." Genom of Gojoseon's meaning was self-evident. Mo Jingqi's gaze slowly swept past Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. He suddenly laughed and said, "Genom of Gojoseon is right. Moreover, young Master Ren didn't do anything. If something happened in the West Hill, who would dare to come to the West Hill? Young Master Ren and I hit it off at first sight. Why don't we go back and have a drink together? Actually, the most talkative person present was Mo Jingqi. The others had more or less experienced a fierce battle. Only Mo Jingqi and the hundreds of experts around him hadn't fought. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao, who was leaning against Yi Li, Mo Jingqi's eyes were filled with resentment, fear, and unwillingness. He wasn't sure how serious Mo Xiaoyao's injuries were. He also didn't dare to bet that his subordinates wouldn't be able to kill him. Therefore, he didn't dare to act rashly. If it was someone else, Mo Jingqi might have given it a try. However, the person who was injured was Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Jingqi didn't dare to do so. Back then, Mo Xiaoyao's injuries were so severe that many imperial physicians had said that he wouldn't live past a month. However, he managed to survive. Many people said that he wouldn't recover in his lifetime. However, in less than 10 years, he was standing in front of Genom of Gojoseon again. His martial arts were even better than before. Faintly, Mo Jingqi had a strange thought in his mind: Mo Xiaoyao can't be killed. Su Qingchen sighed helplessly. He glanced at Mo Jingqi, who was looking at him provocatively. The ruler of a country could provoke a strategist from Glass City and still be so arrogant. How promising. I understand the intentions of Genom of Gojoseon and Emperor Chu. Since that's the case, young Master Ren, hand over the whereabouts of the Murong family's treasures. Before you leave Xiling, the Prince Ding mansion won't make things difficult for you. In other words, once he left Xiling, things might not be the same. He nodded and smiled. Thank you for your mercy, young Master Qingchen. As long as he left Xiling, no, as long as he left in city, there would be people who would come to his aid. When that time comes, he wouldn't necessarily be afraid of the Prince Ding mansion. However, it seemed like he couldn't keep the treasures that he had obtained with great difficulty. Fortunately, he wasn't completely unprepared. Everyone present was a powerful figure. Naturally, they wouldn't go back on their word on this kind of matter. Ren Qining straightforwardly handed over the address and account book of the Murong family's treasure. The gold and silver accumulated by more than 10 generations of Murong family heads was indeed astonishing. After confirming that it was indeed the Murong family's treasure, Ren Qining didn't care about how they were going to divide it. He cleanly bid them farewell. After all, it wouldn't be his turn to divide it. Before Ren Qining left, he took with him the last surviving descendant of the Murong family, Murong Mingyan. According to the original agreement with Genom of Gojoseon, the Prince Ding mansion would get 30% of the Murong family's property, the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce would get 10%, and the rest would go to Genom of Gojoseon. Mo Jingqi only got a portion that Ren Qining specially gave him. Although he was jealous of Mo Xiaoyao and Genom of Gojoseon, he still remembered that this was under someone else's roof, so he didn't say anything. As for Mo Jingli, he had another agreement with the Prince Ding mansion. Naturally, it had nothing to do with the Murong family's property. When Yi Li and the others returned to Qingyuan Inn, the entire inn was already empty. From the shopkeeper to the cleaning staff, everyone had disappeared. Yi Li and the others already knew that Qingyuan Inn was related to Ren Qining, so they weren't too surprised. For safety's sake, they all moved to the inn that Su Qingchen was temporarily staying at. Genom of Gojoseon left Leitingfeng to deal with the aftermath and rushed back to the Emperor of Xiling City on the same day. Mo Xiaoyao's injuries really weren't light. He was forced by Yi Li to lie on the bed to recuperate and couldn't get out of bed to move. For Mo Xiaoyao, lying on the bed to recuperate was more painful than killing him. However, Yi Li had been frightened by his injuries and ordered him to stay on the bed to rest. Therefore, Master Prince Ding became even more persistent in pestering Wang Fei to accompany him to recuperate. Master Qing Chen's face became uglier by the day as he worked outside. Reporting to Prince Wang Fei. Emperor Chu and Li Wang have come. The guard outside the door reported. Mo Xiaoyao, who was lazily lying on the bed with his head raised as Yi Li fed him fruit, frowned and said impatiently, "What have they come for?" The guard outside stilled. How could he know why those two had come to find the prince? But this didn't affect the displeasure in his prince's tone. He hurriedly asked, should this subordinate invite them back? The room was quiet for a while before Yi Li's voice came, invite Emperor Chu and Li Wang in. Chapter 556. The door to the room opened. Mo Jingqi and Mo Jingli entered together. Within the room, the screen separating the inner and outer rooms had already been removed. As soon as the two entered, they saw Mo Xiuyao half reclining on the bed. His white hair was casually scattered on the bed, and his white robes made him appear particularly cold and distant. Yi Li sat on the edge of the bed, casually putting down the apple she had just peeled. Nodding her head, she smiled and said, Emperor Chu, Prince of Li, please sit. The two silently sat down. The imperial bodyguards were standing guard outside, and Yi Li was being held back by Mo Xiuyao. Naturally, they could not expect anyone to serve them tea. Fortunately, the two were not here to drink tea. Mo Xiuyao glanced at the two, asking, what business do you have with I at this time? Such a casual tone was nothing in Mo Jingli's ears. However, in Mo Jingqi's ears, it was completely different. When Mo Xiuyao was still in the Chu capital, he would never have used such a casual and perfunctory tone to speak to him. Even if the politeness and submission in his tone were fake, he would at least put on an act. However, right now, Mo Xiuyao's tone was as if the person in front of him was not the monarch of a country, but a random cat or dog. If he was happy, he would say a few words, and if he was unhappy, he would ignore him. Seeing that Mo Jingqi was about to fly into a rage, Mo Jingli inadvertently coughed lightly and asked, Imperial brother, don't you have something to ask Prince Ding? Although he also found Mo Xiuyao displeasing to the eye, it had to be said that seeing his imperial brother's face darken with anger, Mo Jingqi felt rather happy. Mo Jingqi took a deep breath, suppressing the anger in his heart. Staring at Mo Xiuyao, he asked, where did Princess Changel go? Mo Xiuyao looked doubtfully at Mo Jingqi. Only after quite a while did he lightly scoff. Indifferently, he asked, Princess Changel is your daughter. How would I know where she went? Mo Jingqi sneered, Changel went missing in the Nanzhao Palace. Who else could it be but you? Mo Xiuyao's lips curled up, his tone mocking. That's right. Princess Changel went missing from the Nanzhao Palace. How would I know why she went to the Nanzhao Palace? How would I know when she went to the Nanzhao Palace? Mo Jingqi, your daughter is missing and you come to ask me for her. Are you going to ask I for her one day when your dragon throne is gone? You. Mo Jingqi's complexion alternated between green and white. Finally, unable to restrain himself, he slapped the table and stood up, glaring angrily at Mo Xiuyao. How could Mo Xiuyao take Mo Jingqi's anger seriously? Lying back on the soft pillow, he gazed impatiently at Yi Li, I'm hungry. Yi Li helplessly picked up an apple from the side, cutting it into small pieces and feeding it to him. Mo Xiuyao ate happily, not forgetting to share with Yi Li, eat too. The food that Lei Tengfeng sent over is not bad. Seeing the two people before him acting as if there was no one else present, Mo Jingqi was so angry that his hair stood on end, but there was nothing he could do. He could only leave in a huff. Seeing that he was about to leave, Mo Xiuyao gave him a look and said, wait. Mo Jingqi gritted his teeth and said, what else do you want to say? Mo Xiuyao looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. After thinking for a bit, he said, it's rare for you to specially visit I, so I'll tell you a piece of good news for free. Speaking of which, the Ren Gongzi that you met a few days ago, is the current commander of the northern region, the orphan of the previous dynasty, Lin Yuan. This news immediately made Mo Jingqi dizzy, unable to recover for a long time. Mo Jingli frowned and said, if Ren Qining is Lin Yuan, then who is Tan Jiji? Mo Xiuyao shrugged, indicating that he didn't know. Mo Jingqi laughed coldly and said, you think I'll believe your nonsense? Although he said this, Mo Jingqi's heart was faintly shaken. This was because he knew that Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't use this kind of thing to tease him. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's slightly mocking expression, Mo Jingqi hated that he couldn't find a hole to hide in. The Tan Jiji that he trusted was a remnant of the previous dynasty, and the Ren Qining that he had just saved 2 days ago was also a remnant of the previous dynasty. If this spread out, where would he put his face as the emperor? He couldn't be bothered to argue with Mo Xiaoyao anymore. Mo Jingqi's face darkened as he flicked his sleeves and left. Mo Jingli was a step slower than him, walking behind him. He hesitantly turned around to look at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, "Ren Qining really?" Mo Xiaoyao laughed disdainfully and said, "I don't have candy to eat if I lie to you." Mo Jingqi, that trash, didn't hear anything when someone else was tampering with the land of the Dechu state. In these few years, Ren Qining has taken over the entire northern region, and his hands have already reached the Dechu state. What is that trash doing? This is also good, lest one day I can't stand it anymore and destroy him first. You tell Mo Jingqi that when he becomes the emperor of 10,000 countries, I will send him a sword on behalf of Emperor Taizu to help him die for his country. Mo Jingli was speechless. He turned around and walked out. Outside the door, Mo Jingqi clearly heard Mo Xiaoyao's words. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling, but he couldn't turn around and confront Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Jingli's eyes darkened. He stepped forward and said, "Imperial brother, we should return to the capital." Mo Jingqi coldly snorted, flicked his sleeves and left. Mo Xiaoyao recuperated for nearly half a month before leaving in city with Yi Li. As for the capable young master Qing Chen, he had already returned early. Before leaving, Ling Taihan also brought his 2 sworn sisters and sworn brother to say goodbye. After Pavilion Master Ling fought with Mo Xiaoyao and Murong Xiong twice in a row, he seemed to have realized something and decided to go back and practice in seclusion. And city, which was originally bustling with noise and excitement, had already gradually quieted down. When Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao left, only Lei Tongfeng came to see them off. He still had to stay in city to clean up the mess left behind by the Murong clan's destruction. In comparison, although the Prince Ding mansion didn't achieve its goal, it was the most profitable. Because they didn't have to pay anything, all they got was net profit. They didn't even have to clean up the mess. The 2 of them traveled slowly. By the time they returned to the northwest, it was already the end of September, close to October. Just as they returned to Glass City, they hadn't even entered the Grand Prince Ding mansion when a white and tender little bun wearing an ink-colored brocade rushed out guiltily. Mo Xiaobao hugged Yi Li and cried earth-shatteringly, "Woo woo, woo wah. Mother, your words don't count, woo woo, you clearly said that you would come to see Xiaobao the next day. Woo wah. Mother doesn't want Xiaobao anymore. Xiaobao is a child that no one wants. Woo woo." Yi Li couldn't help but frown. Who taught this child all these messy things? But looking at the tearful little bun, even Xiaobao, who usually hated being called the most, came out. It could be seen that he was really sad. Ever since Mo Xiaobao was born, she had always kept him by her side. This was the first time she left for such a long time. Seeing her son crying to the point of hiccups, Yi Li hurriedly lowered her head and kissed his teary little face. She said softly, "I'm sorry, mother was wrong. How can mother not want Xiaobao? Xiaobao is mother's precious darling." Being kissed by mother in front of so many people, Mo Xiaobao still felt a little embarrassed. His little face immediately turned red like an apple. But he really missed mother. In the end, Mo Xiaobao, who couldn't bear to leave mother, buried his little face in mother's shoulder. His 2 little hands tightly hugged Yi Li's neck, unwilling to let go. "Mother, Xiaobao misses mother." Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaobao's white and tender face, his big watery eyes, her heart softened like a ball of cotton. "Mother also misses Xiaobao. Then mother won't not want Xiaobao anymore?" Mo Xiaobao looked at Yi Li with eager eyes. Yi Li suddenly had no resistance. "Mother will never not want Xiaobao. Mother is the best, Xiaobao loves mother. Smack, Mo Xiaobao cheerfully gave Yili a few longing kisses. The people who came to receive them saw their little Shixi and Wang Fei talking about their longing after a long separation. At the same time, they saw their prince standing at the side with a dark face. After a while, Mo Xiaobao was still grabbing his mother to talk about his longing and grievances. Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He bent down and lifted Mo Xiaobao from Yili's arms. Mother. Being lifted by the collar by Mo Xiaoyao, Mo Xiaobao kicked his little legs in displeasure as he begged mother for help. Xiaoyao. Yili looked disapprovingly at Mo Xiaoyao. It wasn't good to always lift a child by the collar. What if Xiaobao was hurt? Mo Xiaoyao quickly changed the way he carried Mo Xiaobao that Yili could accept. He held Mo Xiaobao in his arms and looked with a smile at his son whose eyes were darting around as he said, Son, Fu Wang also misses you very much. Do you not miss Fu Wang at all when you see me? Mo Xiaobao bared his teeth at him at a place where Yili couldn't see. He didn't want to hate Fu Wang. It was good if Fu Wang didn't come back often. Then no one would steal mother from him. But in front of Yili, Mo Xiaobao could only obediently nod his head and say, this child also misses Fu Wang. Bending down, he kissed Mo Xiaoyao's face. Mo Xiaoyao, whose face was covered in saliva, was stunned. Then looking at the little thing in his arms with a mischievous smile, Mo Xiaoyao resisted the urge to throw the little thing out. He put on a fake smile and said, You really are Fu Wang's good son. Xiaobao is so obedient. Xiaobao must have finished the homework that Fu Wang gave you before you left, right? Mo Xiaobao's face stiffened. His eyes kept darting around, not daring to look at Mo Xiaoyao. Looking at his expression, how could Mo Xiaoyao not understand? He looked at him with an amiable smile, Xiaobao it seems like you need to explain to Fu Wang how much you missed your Fu Wang these past few months, to the point that you forgot to do your homework. Mo Xiaobao was like a punctured balloon, slowly deflating. Fu Wang and whatnot, he hated it the most. Chapter 557. Returning to the Fu, Yili didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she held the pitiful little bun and pleaded with Mo Xiaoyao for him. Although Mo Xiaobao missed his mother very much, it wasn't to the point where he couldn't do anything but think about her day and night. In fact, after Mo Xiaobao left Mo Xiaoyao's oppression and Mr. Qingyun doted on this great-grandson of his, it was completely different from how he was strict with Su Qingchen and the other brothers. As a result, Mo Xiaobao was so pleased with himself that he was like a wild horse that was out of control. So much so that he forgot about the homework that Mo Xiaoyao had assigned to him last night before he left and said that he would check when he came back. This time, Mo Xiaoyao didn't purposely make things difficult for Mo Xiaobao and gave him homework that he could complete. But the bad thing was that Mo Xiaobao was too smart. Smart people tend to be more scheming than others. So he procrastinated, and when he found out that his father was about to return, he didn't even finish a third of his homework. Alright, split it into 10 days and make up for the homework that your father gave you, understand? Yili reached out and rubbed the child's small head as she said softly. In reality, Mo Xiaobao was so young that Yili didn't feel that giving him too much homework was a good thing. But since it was given, it must be completed. She couldn't let the child develop the mentality of slacking and getting lucky. Mo Xiaobao knew that he was in the wrong and carefully raised his eyelids to look at Yili. In a soft voice, he said, Mother, this child knows his mistake. Yili nodded with a smile. If you know your mistake and can change, then you're a good child. Then can this child go a few days later to accompany Taigong? Mo Xiaobao said shyly. Yili couldn't help but smile. Alright, we'll go see Taigong tomorrow and then tell Taigong that we'll go to the academy in a few days. But you can't be like this in the future. If you study with Taigong, you have to understand the principle of perseverance. You can't neglect your studies because of other things, understand? Mo Xiaobao nodded obediently. Mo Xiaoyao sat at the side and looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. If you don't know, then you don't need to study with your grandfather in the future. Father will let your uncle teach you, how about that? Mo Xiaobao's face immediately fell. Compared with his eldest uncle, who was gentle and elegant but always made him a little scared, he preferred his great-grandfather, who was kind and benevolent. Yili looked at the father and son helplessly. She could feel the unpleasing aura from a few hundred meters away. Xiaoyao, your injuries haven't healed yet. Rest for today. If there's anything, we can talk about it tomorrow. Mo Xiaoyao's expression relaxed as he nodded. Mo Xiaobao's eyes brightened, blinking his big eyes at Yili. Nyangqin, Xiaobao wants to sleep with Nyangqin. Yili was about to answer, but Mo Xiaoyao didn't hesitate to pick up Mo Xiaobao and put him on his lap. Looking down at him, he said, "Little brat, you're almost 6 years old and you still want to sleep with Lili. Do you want to be laughed at?" Mo Xiaobao was dissatisfied, arguing with reason. "Father, you're already 30 years old, why do you still want to sleep with Nyangqin?" Pfft. Yili finally couldn't hold back her laughter. Seeing the adult and child looking at her at the same time, she quickly waved her hand and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I still have some things to deal with in the study. You guys can slowly discuss it." Saying this, she ran away under the two's stare. "I want to sleep with Nyangqin," Mo Xiaobao said firmly. "Li is my wife. If you want someone to accompany you, go find your wife." Mo Xiaoyao said. "Nyangqin is my mother. Go find your mother." Mo Xiaobao widened his big eyes. Mo Xiaoyao's mouth twitched, his expression fierce. "Only Nyangqin can sleep with Nyangqin. Those who sleep with Nyangqin are all cowardly and useless little brats." Mo Xiaobao was conflicted. "Where's my Nyangqin?" Mo Xiaoyao's expression was calm as he said calmly, "When you grow up, you can go find her yourself." Outside the door, Yili heard the two's nonsensical conversation and turned to leave with a dark expression. When Yili and Mo Xiaoyao returned to Glass City, all kinds of administrative matters came crashing down. Although Su Hongyu was there were still many things that required Mo Xiaoyao to personally deal with. The first thing that came was the large amount of news regarding Ren Qining sent from Dechu State. Yili and Mo Xiaoyao had already started preparing for the military exercise before they left Glass City. In the study, Mo Xiaoyao stared at the thick pile of documents in front of him and raised his eyebrows. The efficiency of the Prince Ding Mansion's intelligence network was very good. In less than a month, all kinds of news regarding Ren Qining had been sent to the Prince Ding Mansion's study. Looking at the information, even Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but marvel at how deeply Ren Qining had hidden himself. Ren Qining looked like a youth in his 20s, but in reality, he was the same age as Tan Jiji. He was already 37 or 38 years old. To a normal person, this age was not considered young, but to a person who wanted to conquer the world, he was still too young. This person, Fang 12, had not taken a step into the Central Plains for more than 20 years after arriving at a tribe in northern Jin. In these 20 years, he had slowly gained a foothold in the northern region. He had slowly subdued the various tribes in northern Jin, essentially agreeing to the entire northern region. Without anyone, including the Prince Ding Mansion, noticing, he had quietly expanded the northern region into a place with more than 100,000 elite soldiers. To put it bluntly, even if Ren Qining could not succeed in reviving his country, his current strength was enough to make him king of the northern region. From this, it seemed that Tan Jiji, who had been jumping around happily between the Dechu State and Nanzhao, was more like a smokescreen that Ren Qining had placed in front of people. It was just unknown if this smokescreen was intentional or not. Leng Haoyu just sent news. Mo Jingqi is preparing to move troops to the northern region, Su Hongyu said calmly. Move troops to the northern region? Mo Xiaoyao frowned and looked sideways at Lu Jingxian and the other generals sitting on the side. He asked, can the Chu army defeat the army of the northern region? Lu Jingxian thought for a moment and said, in terms of national strength and military strength, the Chu army has no reason not to be able to defeat the northern region. But in recent years, the northern region has been in chaos and various tribes have gone on expeditions. Although the northern region only has a few 100,000 troops, they can be said to be elite troops that have survived hundreds of battles. And although the Chu state fought a war a few years ago, its record is worrying. Feng Zhiyao laughed coldly. What is the point of the prince being concerned about whether or not he can win? Even if you are willing to send troops to help him pacify the northern Jin, he wouldn't dare to let the Mahist army enter the pass. He has taken most of his troops to the front line at Hong Pass. Mo Xiaoyao smiled in a rare good-natured manner. I am just worried that Mo Jingqi is too useless. If the northern region army really enters, it will not be a good thing for us. If he was worried about the safety of the Chu state, he would not have purposely provoked Mo Jingqi in an city. He only hoped that the generals under Mo Jingqi would not disappoint him too much. Su Qingchen said thoughtfully, if there are no accidents, in at most 3 months, there will be battles between the north and the south. What are the prince's plans? Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Plans? Shouldn't we be preparing for military exercises? Xiling will fight Nanzhao, and the Chu state will fight the northern region. Let's just play with ourselves. Everyone was speechless. Playing with ourselves. Prince, you really have a good personality. Chapter 558. After discussing the matter of Renqining, the topic of conversation naturally turned to the military exercises that had been prepared for several months. Regardless of whether it was Su Hongyu and the other civil officials, or Lu Jingxian and Zhang Qilan and the other military generals, this was undoubtedly an extremely novel matter. In this era, battles were fought from time to time. As a result, there were many who questioned the true significance of this so-called military exercise. However, regardless of what was said, preparations had been made for several months. Everyone was looking forward to it. Upon hearing Mo Xiaoyao's question, Zhang Qilan immediately replied, Prince, please be at ease. According to the prince and princess's instructions, preparations have already been made. The location will be within a radius of 300 li, with Hangzhou as the center. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and stated, the area is large enough. Very good. Just make the preparations according to the previous instructions. Then Prince, when will the time be? Lu Jingxian asked. Mo Xiaoyao lazily raised his eyelids and glanced at him, asking, will the enemy tell you when to launch a sneak attack? Just make the preparations first. Yes, this subordinate obeys. Princess consort, Princess Changel has arrived. Yili was seated in the small study, looking at files when Zhuo Jing came in to report. Yili was somewhat surprised. She had just returned and already had a pile of matters to attend to. To be honest, she had somewhat forgotten about the matter of Princess Changel. Setting down her brush, Yili said, invite her in. Not long after, Princess Changel stepped into the study. After not seeing her for 2 months, the originally delicate and charming little princess seemed to have lost some weight. Her entire person seemed to have matured greatly. However, her originally bright eyes were now somewhat dim and sorrowful. Greetings to Princess Ding. Princess Changel curtsied and saluted. Yili stepped forward and pulled her up. After sizing her up, she said, the princess seems to have lost quite a bit of weight. Is it because the servants are not taking good care of you? Princess Changel promptly shook her head and replied, Princess Consort's words are too serious. The servants of the prince's estate treat Wuyo very well. After following Feng Zhiyao and company back to Glass City, Princess Changel abandoned her original title of princess and used the nickname given to her by the empress. Therefore, other than Feng Zhiyao, Zhuo Jing, and a few others who followed her to Nanzhao, everyone else in the Prince Ding mansion called her Miss Wuyo. They didn't even mention the surname Mo. Seeing Princess Changel grow up so much, Yili sighed helplessly in her heart. Pulling Princess Changel to the side, she sat down and said, it is good that you have not suffered any grievances. If there is anything that your subordinates have not handled properly, feel free to tell me. Or, you can tell Steward Mo and Zhuo Jing. Don't make yourself suffer, understand? Princess Changle's eyes reddened slightly. Gazing at Yi Li, she gratefully stated, everyone treats me extremely well. How could I possibly suffer any grievances? Today, I came to bid farewell to Princess Consort. I want to move out. Yi Li stared blankly. Frowning slightly, she asked, why? Princess Changle replied, I know that everyone treats me very well. However, Wuyo is still an outsider. The Prince Ding mansion is not like any other place. Moving out gives me a bit more freedom. Smiling faintly, Yi Li asked, could it be that your uncle Prince Ding and I will restrict your freedom in this mansion? No, that is not what I meant. Princess Changle was somewhat at a loss. For a moment, it seemed that she did not know how to explain this to Yi Li. In reality, it was not that Yi Li did not understand her meaning. Even if she and Mo Xiuyao trusted Princess Changle, in the end, she was still Mo Jingqi's daughter. In addition, although there were not many people in Li City who knew Princess Changle, there were still a few. If the news that Princess Changle was living in the Prince Ding mansion were to spread, it was possible that in the future, there would be even more twists and turns. However, this 13 or 14-year-old child before her had to think of so many problems. Yi Li could not help but feel somewhat distressed. Perhaps understanding Yi Li's thoughts, Princess Changle revealed a bright smile. Pulling on Yi Li's hand, she said, Princess Ding, I know that you are doing this for my own good. However, I have already grown up and left imperial mother and maternal grandfather. Isn't it necessary for them to feel at ease by becoming an adult? It's not like I don't have anything. Imperial mother gave me enough silver to live in luxury for the rest of my life. When they left, they also left behind 2 trusted aides of the Hua family to take care of me. Moreover, I am in the northwest. Princess Ding will definitely not allow anyone to bully me, right? Yi Li smiled. Reaching out, she stroked the little girl's hair and said, as expected, you have grown up. However, as a girl, what plans do you have for the future? Tilting her head, Princess Changle thought for a moment. Looking at Yi Li, she resolutely stated, I want to study medicine. I know that the Northwest's restrictions on women are not as severe as the Dechu states. After I have completed my studies, perhaps I can open a medical clinic to treat patients. Smiling, Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked, then who do you want to study medicine from? How do you want to become a disciple? You must know that nowadays, very few physicians accept young girls as their apprentices. Medicine is not something that you can learn by reading a few books. Resolutely, Princess Changle replied, I can disguise myself as a woman and become an apprentice at the medical clinic. Otherwise, I will spend money to hire a formidable physician to teach me. Imperial Mother said that so long as one wants to learn, there will always be a way to learn something. Moreover, it's not like I don't know anything. I know how to memorize herbal texts and recognize many medicinal ingredients. At the very least, I am better than someone who knows nothing. It will be easier for Master to accept me. Seeing that the young lady had truly made up her mind, Yi Li beamed at her and whispered, seeing that you are so sincere, I'll tell you a secret. Princess Changle blinked her eyes, looking at her curiously. Yi Li softly replied, the Prince Ding mansion has 2 divine physicians. Ah! Divine physician Shen, who cured Prince Ding's uncle. But I haven't seen him for so long. Princess Changle's eyes brightened, but she still asked doubtfully. Smiling, Yi Li replied, Sir Shen and Sir Lin are bored in their residences, so they moved to the city and opened a medical clinic. If you can have them teach you, you naturally won't have to worry about your medical skills. Although Princess Changle did not know who Dr. Lin was, the name of Shen Yang was known throughout the world. Hearing Yi Li's words, Princess Changle made a decision. Nodding her head, she replied, Thank you, Princess Ding. I know what to do. Raising her brows, Yili smiled and replied, Sir Shen and Dr. Lin may not necessarily accept you. Princess Changle resolutely replied, I will definitely do my best to beg Sir Shen to accept me. Yili no longer tried to persuade her. Sighing, she patted the back of Princess Changle's hand and said, Since you have already made up your mind, I will say no more. Later, I will have someone choose a suitable residence near the prince's residence. You cannot refuse this. In the end, the prince's residence is more familiar with Glass City. It will be more convenient. Princess Changle no longer refused. Her clear eyes reddened, but she still smiled and replied, Then, many thanks, Princess Ding. The two chatted for a while before Princess Changle rose and took her leave. After sending Princess Changle off, Yili pondered for a while before calling for Zhuo Jing and asking, Has young Master Feng San treated Princess Changle well these past few days? Zhuo Jing stared blankly for a moment. Although he did not understand the meaning behind Princess Changle's question, he still answered truthfully, there was nothing good or bad about it. Princess Changle lived in the guest courtyard and did not often meet with young Master Feng San. Yili frowned slightly. Thinking for a while, she asked, Then, what about on the way back? Zhuo Jing replied, On the way back, young Master Feng San did not seem too willing to get close to Princess Changle. This subordinate remembers that once again, we missed the town and rested in the wilderness. Lin Han asked young Master Feng San to deliver some food to Princess Changle. In the end, young Master Feng San threw the food to me. However, young Master Feng San did not treat Princess Changle rudely. Yili nodded and said, I understand. Later, have Feng San come over when he is finished. This subordinate, Feng Zhiyao, requests an audience with Princess Changle. Less than an hour later, Feng Zhiyao appeared outside Yili's study. Enter. Hearing Yili's words, Feng Zhiyao stepped into the study. Smiling, he said, Princess Changle has summoned this subordinate so soon after returning. This subordinate feels extremely honored. What orders does Princess Changle have? Yili was disinclined to pay attention to his mischievous smile. Setting down the dossier, she picked up the teacup by her side and took a sip before indifferently stating, Princess Changle wishes to use Princess Changle. Feng Zhiyao was startled. Before he could speak, he heard Yili continue, I have already agreed. Feng Zhiyao frowned. Somewhat disapproving, he asked, Why? Princess Changle is still a young girl. How will she live by herself when she moves out? Yili smiled faintly and replied, A young girl? Princess Changle is already 14 years old. Although the Prince Ding mansion and the imperial family of the Dechu state are of the same bloodline, they have long been separated by blood. Neither relative nor friend, how can a girl like her remain in the Prince Ding mansion? Feng Zhiyao stared fixedly at Yili. It was obvious that he did not believe her reasoning. Yili did not mind. Raising her eyebrows, she smiled and said, All right. Actually, this consort feels that young Master Feng San seems to have an opinion about Princess Changle. Since this is the case, Princess Changle is no more than an insignificant young girl, while young Master Feng San is the prince's trusted aide. This consort will naturally take care of your feelings first. Feng Zhiyao's complexion was somewhat unsightly. When have I ever had an opinion about Princess Changle? Faced with Yili's smile that was not a smile, Feng Zhiyao could only silently rub his nose. Then, Princess Changle, there is no need for you to have her move out. After all, she is still a child. I've already said that it was she who wanted to move out. A girl living under someone else's roof is unavoidably sensitive. All along the way, you have been acting strangely towards her. Can you blame her for feeling uncomfortable living in the Prince Ding mansion? You also know that she is still a child. Since this is the case, the grudges of adults have nothing to do with her. Not only you, but I'm afraid that everyone in the mansion who knows of her identity also has a knot in their hearts. Although she would not be rude, how could a girl who was as meticulous as hair not be able to detect the attitude of others towards her? It was no wonder that Princess Changle had come to say her farewells on the second day of her return. However, this could not be blamed on anyone. After all, her father was Imo Jingqi. Everyone knew that it was wrong to take their anger out on someone else. However, how many people were capable of doing so? I know that this matter is my fault. Princess Changle, please have her stay, Feng Zhiyao said. Yili shook her head and replied, Princess Changle has already decided to become an apprentice to a master and study medicine. It will be more convenient for her to live outside. The only reason I have asked you to come is to have you find a suitable residence for her, as well as take care of her outside. There are many people and matters within the Prince Ding mansion. Even if we instruct her, it is not certain that she will not be wronged. Feng Zhiyao was silent for a moment. He felt that Yi Li's words were reasonable. Nodding his head, he replied, this subordinate understands. Princess Changle, please be at ease. Chapter 559. At the end of the 10th month, the Dechu state officially declared war on the north. Almost at the same time, Shiling Genom of Gojoseon ordered his son, Genom of Gojoseon heir Leitingfeng to lead 200,000 soldiers to the border between the south and Nanzhao. For a time, all the countries began to mobilize their troops. Even the northern tribes, who were in the middle of the bitter cold, began to move. At this time, the military exercise that the Prince Ding mansion had been preparing for several months began. In the morning, the General Zhang Qilan, who was stationed in the camp 30 li outside of Li City, received an order, lead the troops at full speed to Jiantianya, 50 li northwest of Hangzhou, and seize the natural stronghold Jiantianya. This order came too quickly and could be said to be completely unprepared. Fortunately, the Mahist army had always been well trained. In addition, everyone's hearts had been stretched taut recently, so they did not panic this time. When he received the order, Zhang Qilan was eating dinner with a few of his subordinates and discussing the military situation. Looking at the graceful but elegant handwriting on the letter, Zhang Qilan jumped up and shouted to his subordinates, pass down the order, break camp and depart in an hour. But he felt strange. Why did this order look like Wang Fei's handwriting? The generals all paused. The braver ones quickly asked, General, we are. Zhang Qilan chuckled and said, it's starting. Little ones, work harder. We have to beat that old guy until he cries for his father and mother. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. The atmosphere in the tent instantly relaxed. Zhang Qilan glared and roared, hurry up and get ready. Immediately, everyone dispersed out of the tent and went to dispatch their subordinates. After sending his subordinates away, Zhang Qilan looked at the letter in his hand again. He wiped his face and turned to prepare for his expedition. General Zhang, sorry to disturb you so late at night. Outside the tent, an elegant voice said with a faint smile. Zhang Qilan paused and then realized who had spoken. He quickly went forward. The curtain outside the tent was lifted and the person outside walked in. Zhang Qilan hurriedly cupped his hands and said, this subordinate greets Princess. Unlike usual, Yi Li was wearing a long gray cloak, but her hair was combed into a man's bun. From the white hem of the cloak, it could be seen that it was a man's clothing. Zhang Qilan had some doubts but still asked, Wang Fei, this is. Yi Li smiled and said, General Zhang is about to go to war. This one is not talented enough to recommend myself as an advisor. I hope General will not reject me. Wang Fei is saying that she wants to march with us. Zhang Qilan asked in surprise. Yi Li nodded. Zhang Qilan said with some difficulty, this. Wang Fei's body is priceless. What if? Yi Li played with the folding fan in her hand and said with a smile, there's no guarantee that nothing will happen in this world. Besides, I've been on the battlefield several times. Even if I can't help General Zhang, I won't drag you down. Zhang Qilan said he didn't dare. He naturally knew the abilities of this Wang Fei. With her help, it was like obtaining a powerful advisor and general out of nowhere. But Yi Li's status made him uneasy. Also, if this was the case, even if he won against Lu Jingxian, it could only be said that they had a slight advantage. Yi Li naturally saw the reason for his hesitation. She couldn't help but smile and say, "Speaking of this matter, it is actually General Zhang who is at a slight disadvantage." "Does General Zhang know who is leading the Western Army?" Hearing this, Zhang Qilan suddenly had a bad feeling. His mind moved as he said, "Is it?" Yi Li nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, the other side is led by Prince Ding. Lu Jingxian is the deputy general." Zhang Qilan's face darkened. Even though he was much older than Prince Ding, when it came to commanding troops, he could only admit that he was inferior. When Mo Xiuyao had conquered the south and Nanzhao, Zhang Qilan had accompanied him. He had probably never thought in his life that he would face off against Mo Xiuyao. Yi Li looked at Zhang Qilan with a smile and said, "General, are you declaring defeat before the battle?" Zhang Qilan gritted his teeth and nodded. "Since that is the case, I will have to trouble Wang Fei." Declaring defeat before the battle was naturally impossible. So right now, he couldn't care about Yi Li's status. The more experts he had, the better. Even if he couldn't win, he had to bite off a piece of the other's flesh. What's more, the thought of exchanging blows with His Highness made his blood boil. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "I don't dare. This one is Chu Junwei. General can just call me by my name." An hour later, the army had finished their preparations. At this time, the sky had already darkened, but the army had to march through the night. Glass City was 300 li away from Jiantian Cliff. The Black Cloud Cavalry was fine, but it was impossible for the Mahist army's normal soldiers to arrive in a day. When the army set out, the generals by Zhang Qilan's side discovered that there was a young man with a gray cloak at the general's side. In the darkness of the night, even his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. "General, this is..." Zhang Qilan's face twisted slightly. He said in a low voice, "This is this general's military advisor." "Where is Feng Zhiyao?" Feng Zhiyao was also on the list of generals for this exercise. However, young Master Feng San, who had always been by Mo Xiuyao's side, was unfortunately assigned to the opposite side of Prince Ding. But from the start, Zhang Qilan had never seen this young master show his face. Yi Li said in a low voice, "Feng San has already left." Zhang Qilan was startled, but he quickly reacted. With over 10,000 soldiers, it was impossible for them to reach Jiantian Cliff without being discovered by Prince Ding. The worst thing was that there was a division of the Western Army that they had to pass through on their way to Jiantian Cliff. Wang Yi would definitely not allow them to reach Jiantianya so smoothly. Feng Zhiyao leading the Black Cloud Cavalry to open up a path in front was much better than being stopped and beaten when they reached the place. In the darkness of the night, a group of people rode their horses forward. Behind them was a long line of Mahist army soldiers. Inside the Western Army camp, Mo Xiuyao was still dressed in white, his hair white like snow. He sat lazily in the large tent, looking at the map in front of him as if he was deep in thought. Lu Jingxian sat next to him and said, "Prince, Zhang Qilan can be considered to be from the Black Cloud Cavalry and has always been fast. I'm afraid that they have already left the camp." Mo Xiuyao nodded and raised his eyebrows. "No matter how fast they are, they only have 10,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. If they want to rely on 10,000 Black Cloud Cavalry to snatch Jiantian Cliff from us, they must be dreaming." Lu Jingxian nodded and said with a frown, "However, although we have 50,000 Black Cloud Cavalry, our normal strength is clearly weaker than the enemy. The Black Cloud Cavalry's attacks are strong, but their defense is a bit weaker. Even if we take Jiantian Cliff first, to rely on 50,000 Black Cloud Cavalry to defend against 100,000 Mahist army's attacks will be a bit difficult." Mo Xiuyao looked at Lu Jingxian with a smile. "What? Is General Lu afraid of Zhang Qilan?" Lu Jingxian's expression changed. He stuck out his chest and said, "Who would be afraid of him?" "Prince, don't worry, I swear to defend Jiantian Cliff to the death." Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand and said, "What do you mean swear to the death? Don't forget that Jiantian Cliff is not the final goal. If we lose all of our men at Jiantian Cliff, how are we going to fight the later battles?" Chapter 560. Lu Jingxian was a little surprised and asked, "What does Prince have in mind?" Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and said, "Zhang Qilan will definitely rush to Jiantianya with all his might. Let's not rush over there. No matter what, we are still faster than him. Let's add some obstacles to their path. Also, add a line of defense 20 li in front of Jiantianya. Even if Jiantianya cannot defend in the end, it will at least deplete half of their forces." "I understand." Lu Jingxian nodded. Mo Xiaoyao nodded with satisfaction and said, "Then Jiantianya will be handed over to you." Hearing this, Zhang Qilan was stunned. "Handed over to me? Then Prince?" Mo Xiaoyao said with a smile that was not a smile, "I can't tell you." The journey of the East Army was not smooth. On the afternoon of the second day, the army met with the first line of defense set up by the enemy. However, Feng Zhiyao, who had set out earlier to open up the path, was nowhere to be seen. The enemy did not have many people blocking their path, less than 2,000 to 3,000 people. If it was on flat ground, an army of 100,000 would be able to trample them to death. However, at this time, they were circling around the mountain path. It was as if one man could hold off 10,000 men. Zhang Qilan was so angry that he kept calling Lu Jingxian despicable and shameless. However, no matter how despicable and shameless the enemy was, they still had to fight. Zhang Qilan was not a brute who only knew how to shout and curse. He immediately sent out a group of people to sneak around the enemy's back and attack from the front and back. Even so, they wasted almost 6 to 8 hours in this place. By the time they met with 2 or 3 similar obstacles along the way, Zhang Qilan had already understood that Lu Jingxian was trying to delay them. Yet, this was the kind of scheme that couldn't be broken. Even if they knew that Lu Jingxian was trying to delay them, they had no choice but to follow this path. If they wanted to take a detour, it would take even longer. The final goal of this act was not the Sky Stream Cliff, but a small town that was dozens of miles away from the Sky Stream Cliff. There were 40,000 soldiers in the small city, and Mo Xiaoyao's Western Army's mission was to occupy the small city. Yi Li and Zhang Qilan's mission was to reinforce and destroy the Western Army. The mountain stream cliff was the most important place because both the Eastern and Western armies had to pass through here to reach the small city. If Mo Xiaoyao had enough troops, he could naturally pass through Jiantianya and take the small city. However, he only had 50,000 Black Cloud cavalry and 40,000 Mahist army. On the other hand, the East Army had 10,000 Black Cloud cavalry and 150,000 Mahist army. The current commander of the small city could not be ignored. He was the Mahist army's commander of Jiangxia city, Yuan Pei, who was very good at defending cities. Thus, if Mo Xiaoyao used all of his troops to attack the city, if he was unable to take down the small city in 3 days, the Western Army would be surrounded by the Mahist army. Thus, he could only leave a portion of his troops to Lu Jingxian to delay the reinforcements. However, this also reduced the strength of the attacking troops. Because of the ambushes along the way, the Eastern Army used a total of 5 days to reach the lower 3 heavens 20 li away from Jiantianya. Looking at the banners and cold swords on the hillside, Zhang Qilan laughed coldly and turned around to order them to set up camp. His subordinates were all eager to give it a try. The past few days of marching had made them all want to vent their frustrations. They all asked Zhang Qilan for permission to fight. Zhang Qilan waved his hand to suppress everyone's requests. The enemy had the geographical advantage. Attacking in broad daylight was the same as seeking death. What does Mr. Chu think? Zhang Qilan turned his head and asked Yi Li, who was sitting to the side. Everyone also stopped talking and looked at the white-clothed young master sitting to the side. Although many people in the army had seen Yi Li before, they were not familiar with her. Yi Li had changed into men's clothing and changed her appearance slightly. She also rarely spoke, so none of these generals recognized that this somewhat silent young master was actually their Princess Ding. Of course, this was also related to the fact that these generals were proud and did not like Yi Li, who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Naturally, there were not many people who were willing to talk to her. It seems like General Lu wants to stop us outside Jiantianya. At this time, Prince Ding should have already led his troops to attack the city. Yi Li muttered. The people below could not help but scoff. Who didn't know how to say such words? Just by looking at the situation in front of them, they knew what the other party meant. However, Zhang Qilan said thoughtfully, Mr. Chu means. Prince Ding is not at Jiantianya right now. If it's only Lu Jingxian. I don't think he has many troops. I might be able to break through Jiantianya in 3 days. Yi Li shook her head and said, if we break through Jiantianya in 3 days, how many casualties does the general intend to suffer? Jiantianya can be considered a natural stronghold. Naturally, it is easy to defend and difficult to attack. If we lose all our troops here, how are we going to reinforce General Yuan? One of the generals below could not help but say, but if we don't break through, how are we going to get there? If we want to take a detour, it will take at least 7 to 8 days. Also, if we walk from the south, we will have to cross mountains and rivers. By the time we get there, we might not even be able to fight. If we go from the north, it will be a large swamp. We won't be able to cross at all. Zhang Qilan looked at Yi Li and asked, what does Mr. Chu mean? Yi Li pointed at the map on the table and said, General Yuan is good at defending cities. Even Prince Ding may not be able to break through the city in a short amount of time. What I mean is, to wipe out all the troops at Jiantianya. Everyone was shocked. Zhang Qilan frowned and said, this will take time, what if we can't reinforce the city in time? Yi Li did not frown and said calmly, we can just take it back after it's broken. A deputy general hesitated and said, but, once the city is broken, the exercise will be over. Yi Li said calmly, it will only be over if one side concedes defeat or both sides suffer great losses. Is it possible that the city is taken by the enemy during the battle and the reinforcements have to go back the way they came? Everyone was silent and seemed to be deep in thought. The tent was silent for a while. Zhang Qilan slapped the table and stood up, saying, good. We'll do as Mr. Chu says. The success or failure of this mission will be handed over to Mr. Chu. Do you have a plan? Yi Li looked at Zhang Qilan with a smile and said slowly, I'm still thinking about it. The night on the battlefield was not peaceful. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. Killing and arson were common on the battlefield. Therefore, when Yi Li was woken up by the noise outside for the 3rd time that night, she was not surprised. She got up and put on her clothes and cloak before walking out of the tent. Qin Feng immediately appeared at the door. Master. Yi Li frowned slightly and said, why aren't you resting? Qin Feng said, Wei Lin has gone to rest. He'll come to replace me in 2 hours. This time, Yi Li did not bring Zhuo Jing and Lin Han. Instead, she brought Qin Feng and Wei Lin out. After all, Prince Ding and the king, as well as all the generals in the city, were not there. Zhuo Jing and Lin Han had been left behind to help Su Qingchen. Yi Li said, you all go rest. Just send 2 people to keep watch. Qin Feng shook his head and said, I'll go back to rest in a while. It won't affect tomorrow's work. Yi Li knew she could not persuade him, so she did not say anything more. She looked curiously at the place where the fire was shining and asked, whose people are making trouble? Qin Feng held back his laughter and said, it's a few of General Zhang's subordinates. They seem to have agreed to attack the defending army at night. Each of them would hold on for 2 hours and then retreat regardless of the outcome. This is the third wave. The defending army on the mountain probably won't be able to sleep tonight. Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at the place where the sound of fighting could be heard. She raised her eyebrows and smiled, interesting. Is this their own idea? Qin Feng nodded and said, it seems that they talked to General Zhang after dinner. General Zhang probably agreed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have acted on their own. It seemed that Qin Feng had a good impression of those hot-tempered young people. Although he did not speak for them, he did explain that their actions did not violate military rules. Yili smiled and walked out, saying, it's always good for young people to have their own ideas. Even if they make a mistake in the drill, it's better than making a mistake on the battlefield. What does Wang Fei mean? Qin Feng frowned. Yili said, it's fine if they harass him once or twice, but if they do it again and again, do they think Lu Jingxian is a vegetarian? Qin Feng was silent. Yili smiled and said, let's go and take a look. Qin Feng hurriedly caught up and asked curiously, Wang Fei is saying that they will have a problem. Yili smiled faintly and said, Lu Jingxian is an old general who has been on the battlefield for a long time. How could he be played by a few young people? If they stop after 1 or 2 times, the other side will be more cautious and probably won't be able to have a peaceful night. But if they do it again and again, how could Lu Jingxian not make a move? As the saying goes, going too far is as bad as not going far enough. Then, Qin Feng frowned and said, should we send someone to tell General Zhang? Yili shook her head and said, General Zhang and General Lu have known each other for decades. It's impossible that he doesn't understand him. He will definitely be prepared. There's no need for us to meddle. Just watch. As the two were talking, Zhang Qilan's clear voice came from behind them, Mr. Chu hasn't rested yet this late. Did those young people steal it? The two returned and saw Zhang Qilan walk over with his head held high. He was wearing armor and battle robes and looked like he was about to go into battle. Yili couldn't help but smile and say, General Zhang, it's so late. What are you doing? Zhang Qilan pretended to be angry and said, those young people don't know what's good for them. They provoked old Lu. I have to take them back while they're still fine. Hearing this, Yili laughed clearly and said, then I'll have to trouble General Zhang. Zhang Qilan cupped his hands and said, I'll take my leave first. Chapter 561. At dawn, a group of overly excited and hot-blooded youths were indeed dragged back by Zhang Qilan, their faces covered in dirt. Yili and Wei Lin, who came later to replace Qin Feng, waited until the sounds of fighting at the front had stopped. Only after another hour did they see the group of people return to the camp. The young generals who were originally in high spirits drooped their heads, as if they were vegetables that had been hit by frost. As soon as they entered the camp, they saw Yili smiling at them while looking at a carriage. The expressions of the young generals became even more awkward. They felt that the general had found such a young military advisor who they didn't know where he came from. He didn't know anything and only said a few useless words from time to time, but the general valued him so much. These young men were naturally unconvinced. They all thought that they were much better than this pretty boy. Now that they had lost so much face in front of him, their expressions naturally didn't look too good. Mr. Chu, you haven't rested yet? Zhang Qilan saw Yili and naturally went up to greet her. Yili smiled and said, General, you haven't rested either, right? You've worked hard, General. Are you all right? Zhang Qilan sighed and said, Fortunately, you're fine. He turned around and glared at everyone, then roared, Why aren't you going back to rest? Are you waiting to be punished? Hearing this, the young generals all scattered like birds and beasts. Seeing how everyone looked at Zhang Qilan as if he was a killing god, Yili couldn't help but laugh softly and say, General clearly has no intention of punishing them. Why are you purposely scaring them? Zhang Qilan sighed helplessly and said, The people who came out this time are all young brats. Not only have they never been on a proper battlefield, but they're still hot-blooded and charging forward. If they really went on the battlefield, who knows what would happen. It turned out that the first 2 waves of ambushes had caused the enemy to be flustered for a while. These brats got carried away and decided to take turns to fight until dawn. This way, the enemy naturally couldn't sleep for the entire night, but their own people could take turns to rest. His idea was not bad, but he forgot to observe the surrounding positions and the situation of the enemy. Halfway through the 3rd sneak attack, Lu Jingxian sent 2 groups of soldiers and horses to quietly flank them from both sides. If it wasn't for Zhang Qilan leading the troops, even if they didn't arrive in time, they wouldn't be able to match the 4,000 to 5,000 troops that they brought. Even those 4 to 5 young generals would have died there. The battlefield had always been cruel and merciless. If one didn't come from an aristocratic family, there wouldn't be many captains in an army of millions. Isn't that giving Lu Jingxian a chance to beat you up? The young generals were a little embarrassed, and the older generals sitting next to them also began to chuckle. General, what should we do next? A young general stepped out from the crowd and asked expectantly. Zhang Qilan frowned and turned to look at Yi Li, who was sitting next to him, and asked, "What does Mr. Chu think?" Yi Li tapped the fan in her hand carelessly and said, "The other side has the higher ground, so it will take a lot of time and effort to forcefully attack them. Let's continue our nightly harassment, but don't let General Lu catch us again. Next time, General Zhang might not be able to lead the troops to help everyone out." A few young generals looked at Yi Li with some dissatisfaction and said, "Since Mr. Chu is the military advisor, he must have some tricks up his sleeve. It's just that we won't be able to take them down if we launch sneak attacks every night. If we drag this out for 10 days or half a month, we can just admit defeat without fighting." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked with a smile, "Then what do you all think?" This subordinate requests to be the vanguard and open a path for the army. A young general cupped his hands and said to Zhang Qilan. The others followed suit and asked for Zhang Qilan's permission. It was obvious that they wanted to fight the enemy head-on. Yi Li looked at them plainly and said, "I don't object to fighting head-on, based on the enemy's strength. If we bet on half of their strength, we will definitely be able to take this place. However, I would like to remind all of you that although this is just a drill, if this were a real battle, it would mean that at least half of the 100,000 soldiers here and outside would lose their lives on this small hill in front of Jiantianya." "So what?" someone asked softly. Yi Li smiled and said, "If losing half of our soldiers, including the lives of all of you here, isn't a big deal. In that case, how would the remaining 50,000 soldiers pass through the Heavenly Stream Cliff, which was known as a natural barrier? How many soldiers will be left after they pass through? Or do you all think that, even if we manage to pass through, we will be able to save General Top Scorer from being surrounded? I would like to remind all of you that based on my understanding of Prince Ding, the number of soldiers left behind at Jiantianya is at most a third of the Western Army. The remaining 2/3 are fresh soldiers who have yet to participate in the battle. Everyone here has sacrificed themselves, but may I ask, what will happen to General Top Scorer and the soldiers guarding the city?" Chapter 562. Before Yi Li could finish speaking, the youths who had been acting righteously all turned red in the face. Although they weren't convinced, they couldn't help but admit that strategist Chu was right. Half of the reason why they charged forward so bravely was because they knew this was a drill and not a real battlefield. If this was a real battlefield, would they still charge forward so recklessly? Or even if they continued to charge forward so bravely, what kind of consequences would they cause? Zhang Qilan knocked on the table and said, "Fine, I'll take care of tonight's matters. Without my orders, no one is allowed to act rashly. Those who disobey will be executed." Although this wasn't a real battlefield, his orders were real military orders. Those who disobeyed military orders, regardless of whether it was a real battlefield or not, would be executed without mercy. He turned to look at Yi Li and said with a smile, "Mr. Chu, I'll leave these immature brats to you." Yi Li smiled and said, "It's my honor to have the general believe in me." Zhang Qilan nodded with satisfaction. He stood up and glanced at the group of young men who were still eager to make a move, and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Chu's words represent this general's words. Those who disobey will be beheaded." Zhang Qilan led his older subordinates to deal with Lu Jinxian's men at the front. The group of young and aggressive generals were surrounded by Yi Li and couldn't move. The youths became more and more irritable as they listened to the soldiers entering and leaving the camp every day without a share of them. Finally, on the afternoon of the third day, they couldn't hold it in any longer and came to find Yi Li to argue. Outside Yi Li's temporary tent, Yi Li's smile was as warm as the spring breeze as she looked at the youths in front of her. She smiled and said, "Do you have any objections?" The leader said, "We want to go to war." "What right do you have to stop us from going to the battlefield?" Yi Li leisurely played with the fan in her hand and said casually, "Because I'm the strategist. Because General Zhang gave you to me to dispatch. Because I won't allow it, you can't go." This kind of arrogant answer was definitely a provocation to this group of young people. Everyone looked at Yi Li as if they wanted to immediately rush up and give her a good beating. Qin Feng and Wei Lin, who were standing behind Yi Li, calmly glanced at the youths in front of them. A cold glint flashed in their eyes. Yi Li looked at the young men in front of her and continued, "You want to go to the battlefield? What's the point of you going to the battlefield? The generals under General Zhang's command have been fighting without you for the past 2 days, and there has never been a situation where General Zhang has to go personally to reinforce them. It's fine if you're not smart enough, but even if you want to be a fierce general who can defeat the enemy with brute force, you won't be able to fight better than ordinary soldiers, right? Rather than being a hindrance on the battlefield, it's better to stay at the back." The young men were so angry that their faces turned red. One of them with a bad temper stepped forward and pointed at Yi Li with a red face and coaxed, "You're just a weak scholar. What right do you have to talk about us like this?" Yi Li looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile and slowly said, "Because," with a swish, the fan was swung open and like a sharp blade, it slashed towards the young man's throat. That person jumped in fright and quickly bent over to dodge, but he didn't expect his lower body to be kicked in the acupoint. Before he could react, his body swayed and he fell to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Yi Li waved her fan twice and said casually, "You can't even beat a weak scholar." Everyone was speechless. This time, they were really hit hard. In the past few years, the Mahist army had placed great importance on nurturing young generals. Therefore, these young generals were only in their early 20s, but most of them were already lieutenants or even captains. However, most of them had never been on the battlefield. This was what Yi Li was most worried about. The battlefield had always been a huge meat grinder. It didn't matter if you were an ordinary person or a genius. Once you were involved, the one who achieved the most in the end wasn't the smartest or the most powerful one, but the one who survived. Since ancient times, many geniuses had been drowned out like sand by the waves. Although Yi Li didn't expect them to understand what a real battlefield was this time, and they would only be able to learn when they were on the battlefield, at least they had to suppress the arrogance of these geniuses. As if she didn't see everyone's shocked expressions, Yi Li looked at everyone with a smile and said, "Don't say that I bullied you. These 2 people learned from me. If you beat them, don't even talk about going to fight with General Lu. Even if you want to go to Xiling and destroy Genom of Gojoseon, I won't stop you." Everyone looked at each other and exchanged glances. Yi Li seemed to be afraid that the fire wasn't burning hot enough and continued to pour oil on it. "If you don't have confidence in fighting one-on-one, you can fight together." Qin Feng and Wei Lin could obviously understand Yi Li's meaning. Wei Lin snorted coldly and said, "Don't waste time. Let's fight together." This obviously contemptuous tone finally snapped the last string in everyone's mind. No one knew who shouted, but 5 or 6 young people all pounced towards Qin Feng and Wei Lin at the same time. Of course, Wei Lin, who had just drawn hatred to himself, was the one they focused on. Yi Li retreated to the side and leisurely leaned against Qin Feng and Wei Lin, moving among the youths with ease. Rather than a group fight, it was more like two people playing with a group of crazy kittens. These youths were indeed not as good as their peers in the Mahist army, but compared to Qin Feng and Wei Lin, who came from Qi Lin and were the best among them, they were not enough. The youth who had just been kicked to the ground by Yi Li was still sitting on the ground and didn't get up. He didn't join the fight. It was because he stood outside the fight that he could see the gap between himself and Qin Feng and Wei Lin more clearly. He looked at Yi Li and finally drooped his proud head. Yi Li kicked him with interest and asked, "Why don't you try?" The youth sat on the ground and didn't get up. He shook his head and said, "I'm not an idiot. We can't beat them at all. Do you want to make a fool of yourself?" Yi Li nodded and said with a smile, "You are indeed not their match, but that's not important. They are not on the same path as you. It's best if your martial arts are strong, but if you can't, there's no need to compete with them. General Zhang may not be their match." The youth said with dissatisfaction, "Then why do you want them to fight?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said, "Because compared to you, General Zhang clearly has a smart brain. You don't have anything, but you think you have everything. I think your brains need to be fixed together with your bodies." The youth opened his eyes wide and glared fiercely at Yi Li, saying, "We're not stupid. They were the rising stars of the Mahist army. Who didn't praise them for having a bright future?" Yi Li nodded seriously and said, "You really aren't stupid. How can I describe your level of stupidity? Have you ever seen an idiot seeking death?" The youth's face turned red with anger. She was saying that they weren't even as stupid as idiots. Yi Li looked at the person in front of her with interest and couldn't help but smile. A young man in his early 20s whose emotions could rise and fall so easily. In this era where people matured early, it was quite rare. Seeing Yi Li's teasing smile, the youth couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. "What are you laughing at?" Yi Li coughed lightly and covered her mouth with her fan, saying, "Nothing, I just want to laugh." While the two were talking, Qin Feng and Wei Lin had already put down a group of children who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. No matter how they went easy on them, the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Therefore, the originally well-dressed young generals all fell to the ground in a sorry state. Yi Li looked down at everyone with a smile and said, "How is it? Do you admit defeat now?" "We admit defeat." Although the young generals were still a little depressed, the way they looked at Yi Li and the other two was very different from before. In the military, the strong were king. Although these young people were arrogant, they still respected the strong. The fight just now also made them understand the difference in strength between them and their opponents. "But Mr. Chu, we can't always hide in the back and be protected by others, right?" Although they knew that they were inferior, they were now on the battlefield. They had to put away their thoughts and think about it later. Right now, they had to solve the battle in front of them. Yi Li looked at them with a smile and asked, "You guys really want to fight?" Hearing this, everyone knew that there was hope. 6 or 7 pairs of eyes looked at Yi Li in unison. The anticipation and desire in their eyes made Yi Li feel a little pressured. Seeing this group of enthusiastic young people in front of her, Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "It's not impossible. Go back and choose 200 elites from your subordinates and wait for orders." "Mr. Chu, what do we need to do?" Yi Li said in a deep voice, "It's a secret. Remember, everything has to be done quietly. Do not attract anyone's attention, including General Zhang. The people who are discovered will stay behind to reflect." Young people all like mysterious and exciting things. Hearing Yi Li say this, everyone became even more excited. Yi Li looked at them with a slight frown and said seriously, "Also, even though this is acting, the danger still exists. This mission can be said to be the most dangerous of the dangerous. I cannot guarantee that there will be no casualties. Do you understand? This subordinate understands, everyone said in unison. What Yili said was not a matter for them at all. How could there be no casualties on the battlefield? Yili nodded and said, all right, go prepare. We will gather at the second watch period. Yes. Wang Fei, these brats are too immature. Wang Fei, why do you care about them? Wei Lin said with dissatisfaction. These brats had been rude to Wang Fei in the past few days. If they died 100 times in the Wang Fu, it wouldn't be enough. Yili smiled faintly and said, it's a group of young people, and they're quite cute. Qin Feng and Wei Lin silently looked at each other. At the same time, they decided not to spread Wang Fei's evaluation. If the prince knew, these brats would die 100 times. Chapter 563. Before the second day of the night, a group of young soldiers had followed Yi Li's instructions and quietly led their men out of the camp. It wasn't that they were completely convinced by Yi Li's mysterious military advisor, but if they didn't follow Yi Li, they wouldn't be able to fight. Since it was already like this, they could only tactfully follow his instructions. It was unknown if this group of young soldiers had some ability or if Zhang Qilan was being courteous, but a few of them actually led their men out of the camp without missing a single one. When they stood in front of Yi Li, they couldn't help but raise their chins and feel a little proud. Yi Li only smiled faintly and nodded his head in satisfaction as he looked at the group of over 1,000 men. Military advisor? What are we going to do? Someone couldn't help but ask. In the darkness, Yi Li spread out a map on the ground and squatted down. He used the torch in his hand to point at a few places on the map and said, General Zhang is leading his men to attract the attention of the enemy. You guys follow me to climb up from these 2 places and go around to the back of Jian Tianya. Someone frowned and said, since the military advisor already had a plan, why didn't you say so earlier? We could have sent men to scout the way. Yi Li looked at him and smiled, scout the way. Do you think that General Lu's men are wooden stakes and won't discover you guys? But we can't see the way at night. How are we going to get there? Although they didn't know the details, they roughly knew where the path was after looking at the locations pointed out by the military advisor. This area was easy to defend and hard to attack. Even in the day, it was dangerous, much less at night. Yi Li stared at the young man who spoke and said, that's why I said. I can't guarantee that there won't be any casualties. This is a battlefield. Everyone was shocked. That's right, this was a battlefield. On the battlefield, don't even talk about walking in the dark. Sometimes, even if one knew that they would die, they would still sacrifice their lives. Yi Li looked at them and said, those who aren't willing to go can still go back the way you came. I'll give you half an hour to communicate with your subordinates. I want to make it clear that it's not just dangerous to climb up. Even if we reach the cliff safely, it won't be a smooth journey. If you drop the ball on the road, you will be punished according to military law. In less than a quarter of an hour, everyone returned to Yi Li. Seeing that none of the teams retreated, Yi Li nodded in satisfaction. She turned around and said, let's go. Although it was already the second night watch period, the night wasn't tranquil. Not far away on a hillside, the 2 armies were engaged in a fierce battle. Taking advantage of this time, the group of people, led by Qin Feng and Yi Li, quietly climbed up the steep cliff path, with Wei Lin at the back. It wasn't a long journey, but it took them 2 hours to reach the top. Yi Li turned to look at the young people under the moonlight. Their clothes were messy but their eyes were bright. She nodded in satisfaction. Although their clothes were torn by the rocks, branches, and weeds on the mountain, and many people had scratches on their faces, no one was left behind. They also didn't make any big mistakes that would attract the attention of the enemy. It seemed that the Mahist army's daily training was very good. Because the entire mountain was guarded by the enemy, their group of more than 1,000 people was not a small number. They were even more careful after going up the mountain. They avoided the eyes and ears of the enemy along the way, and they only reached their destination at the 5th night watch period. When they reached their destination, before Yili could tell them to rest, a few figures flashed out from the shadows. Everyone was startled and quickly held their weapons. "Don't be nervous, we're on the same side." The person who came waved his hand and smiled. The 5th night watch period was the darkest time before dawn. Everyone couldn't see the person's face clearly and naturally didn't dare to let down their guard. Yili calmly said, "Feng San." Feng Zhiyao slowly walked over and smiled, "I didn't think that you guys would be able to make it here. I thought that if you guys couldn't make it, we would have to do it ourselves." Only when he walked closer did everyone see clearly that the person who came was Feng Zhiyao. "General Feng, how come you're here?" Feng Zhiyao smiled and said, "I've been here since the beginning. Wasn't I waiting for you guys?" "Young Master Chu, it's been hard on you." Yili rolled her eyes and asked, "How is it?" Feng Zhiyao said, "Lu Jingxian plans to defend Jiantian Cliff to the death. Lu Jingxian has about 30,000 people under him, and at most 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. Jiantian Cliff was a strategic location, and the Black Cloud Cavalry couldn't be used here. It would be a waste to leave too many behind." Feng Zhiyao looked at the group behind Yili and frowned, "Why are there so few people?" Yili said, "Do you think it's easy to bring people up here? These people are the most limited people. If we drag it out until dawn, we will definitely be discovered. Although we have covered it up a little, the other party may still discover traces of us after dawn. With a group of new recruits, the concealment along the way naturally wouldn't be too ingenious. If the other party's patrolling soldiers had sharp eyes, they would most likely discover traces of a large group of people walking along the way." Feng Zhiyao also knew that he was being too demanding. He looked at Yili and asked, "I only have 3,000 people here. What should we do?" Yili smiled and said, "There's nothing to do. Let's take this opportunity to set a fire behind their backs. If General Zhang grasps the opportunity well, he should be able to rush up." Feng Zhiyao nodded and said, "Let's do it like that." Yili turned around and looked at the people behind her and said, "Rest here for an hour and then set off." The young general behind her said, "Military advisor, we are not tired. We can move now." Yili glanced at him indifferently, "Who cares if you are tired or not? In a while, General Zhang and the others will be fighting. We should take advantage of the moment before dawn to make a move. After causing chaos, we will retreat before the sky turns bright." The young general who spoke rashly blushed and sat down to rest in embarrassment. Feng Zhiyao stood to the side and looked at the group of young fellows behind Yili with interest. He smiled and said, "It seems that young Master Chu also has a time when he can't mix well." Feng Zhiyao's eyes naturally saw that this group of young generals wasn't completely convinced by Yili. Yili didn't even bother to roll her eyes. She walked to a big tree and sat down to rest. "There's no other way. I've let young Master Feng down." Sensing that Yili's mood wasn't very good, Feng Zhiyao touched his nose and consciously turned around to find a place to close his eyes and rest. In the temporary tent outside Jiantian Cliff, Lu Jingxian sat in a chair and closed his eyes to rest. The generals next to him all had angry expressions. There are repeated sneak attacks every night. Do they still want people to rest? Not to mention that Zhang Qilan's subordinates were very depressed these days. Lu Jingxian's side wasn't relaxed either. They had the advantage of being on the high ground. Basically, the eastern troops had to pay the price of at least 5 or 6 people to injure one of them. Moreover, Zhang Qilan definitely wouldn't fight them to the death here. It was fine during the day, but when night came, the other side wouldn't stop tormenting. At night, they couldn't see. If they weren't careful, the other side could sneak up on them. Therefore, the soldiers stationed here couldn't help but be on high alert. After all, no one knew if the other side was just testing them or would really swarm them. After a few days, both sides couldn't help but get angry. Chapter 564. General, the prince sent a letter on horseback, someone reported from outside the tent. Lu Jingxian opened his eyes and scanned the rowdy crowd. He said in a deep voice, "Come in." A soldier came in and presented a letter with both hands. Lu Jingxian opened the letter and slowly frowned after reading it. The other generals changed their expressions and hurriedly asked, "General, what orders does the prince have?" Lv Jingxian casually passed the letter to a deputy general sitting below him. The deputy general stilled when he saw it. He looked dazedly at Lu Jingxian and said, "The prince is reminding general to be careful of the princess consort." The other people also passed the letter around. Lu Jingxian frowned and said, "Speaking of which, in the last few days, the princess consort has not appeared in the army at all." When the princess consort was mentioned, even though she was a woman, these generals who had fought on the battlefield still showed respect. It was not just because the princess consort had military talent that was different from other women, but also because the princess consort had done many things for the Mahist army in the last few years. For example, the promotion of soldiers, the payment of soldiers, the placement of wounded soldiers, and even the organization of the army. Many effective methods had been proposed and implemented by the princess consort. So in the eyes of these soldiers, Princess Ding was not as simple as a normal princess consort, but one of the true controllers of the Mahist army. For the prince to write a letter to remind her, this caused everyone to pay more attention to Princess Ding. But at this time, they did not know what Princess Ding was doing. At this time, Lu Jingxian found that he had overlooked an important person. It wasn't that Lv Jingxian thought that Yi Li was better than Zhang Qilan when it came to commanding troops. It was just that Zhang Qilan had worked with him for more than 10 years, so they had a rough understanding of each other. But Princess Ding was an existence that they did not understand at all. The only understanding of Princess Ding was limited to the battle that she had defeated Genom of Gojoseon a few years ago. Of course, that battle was enough to make any general view her in a new light. There was a saying in the art of war, "Know thyself and know thy enemy to win 100 battles." For some reason, Lu Jingxian suddenly felt a little uneasy. Just as he was thinking about something with his head lowered, the sound of weapons and fighting could be heard from afar. Soon, a soldier came in and reported, "General, the enemy is attacking again. Fight back. Remind the soldiers at the front line not to lower their guard." Lv Jingxian slapped the letter on the table. Then, he stood up and walked out of the tent. Not far away from the Sky Stream cliff, Yi Li looked down at the place where the flames were faintly burning. Behind her, the Sky Stream cliff was still peaceful. She slowly smiled and said in a deep voice, "Let's do it." Yes. Not long after, the fire on the mountain stream cliff soared into the sky. The originally tranquil place gradually became noisy. "General, look." Lu Jingxian, who had just walked out of the tent, turned back to look. His heart sank when he saw the blazing flames rising from Jian Tian Cliff. He thought that he knew where Princess Ding had gone. "General, is there a sneak attack on Jian Tian Cliff?" "Damn it, how did they get there?" "There was a lot of noise before the battle." Lu Jingxian frowned and said in a deep voice, "Shut up. Deputy General, guard this place. I will lead the troops back to reinforce." Because he did not know how many people the enemy had on Jian Tian Cliff, Lu Jingxian did not want to take the risk. He could only lead the troops back to reinforce. He had more than 30,000 men and only 6,000 to 7,000 were left on Jian Tian Cliff. Once Jian Tian Cliff was lost, it would be meaningless for them to stay here. No one dared to argue. They quickly responded and mobilized their own troops. Zhang Qilan, who was at the foot of the hill, also saw the flames in the distance. Of course, it was not the flames on Jian Tian Cliff. It was a signal sent by Yi Li. A smile finally appeared on his calm and resolute face. He shouted, "Beat the drums." Before dawn, the sound of drums shook the sky in the dark night. Amidst the battle cries, the soldiers rushed up the hill like a tide. Lu Jingxian, who was rushing back on his horse, also heard the battle cries behind him. A helpless smile appeared on his face. The prince's reminder was too late. He was careless. Jiantian Cliff was also in chaos. The soldiers who were still asleep hurriedly got up to face the enemy. Naturally, they were not a match for the soldiers who were holding their breath and waiting to attack. Moreover, these people did not have the intention to fight to the death with them. They just lit a fire and ran. If they met the enemy, they would fight if they could. If they could not fight, they would run. The soldiers who were woken up from their sleep were furious. However, they were not as smart as the enemy. They could only fight mindlessly in the chaos. At a high place not far from the battlefield, they could see the battlefield clearly with the help of the light from the fire. Feng Zhiyao stood beside Yi Li. He smiled and looked at the soldiers who were fighting hard below. He said with a smile, "These guys are not bad. It would be great if they could be this brave on the battlefield." This time, not only were the grassroots generals and young people participating in the drill, even the ordinary soldiers were mostly newcomers who had just joined the Mahist army in recent years. Although the former Mahist army veterans could not be said to have experienced hundreds of battles, most of them had been on the battlefield several times. This kind of drill was not as important to them as the new soldiers. Under the light of the fire, some of the soldiers were still fighting with swords and spears. Some had simply rolled on the ground and hugged each other to fight. Some even used tricks such as choking, biting ears, and so on. No wonder young Master Feng San, who always paid attention to his demeanor on the battlefield, was so happy that he laughed. Yi Li looked down calmly and said lightly, "At least they can be a little familiar with it. In the future, they will not panic on the battlefield. The ones who die the quickest on the battlefield are always the new soldiers." Feng Zhiyao stopped laughing and nodded. He said, "Wang Fei is right. General Lu has returned." A strange howl came from the night sky. Feng Zhiyao's expression became serious as he said solemnly. Yi Li nodded and looked at the sky. She said, "It's late. Let's retreat." Feng Zhiyao frowned and said, "But General Zhang." Yi Li said, "Lu Jingxian will probably call back at least half of his men. If General Zhang still can't attack, then we can't do anything. When General Lu's people arrive, we won't be able to leave. Let's go up the mountain." Feng Zhiyao was helpless. He knew that Yi Li was speaking the truth. He could only give the signal to retreat. The young soldiers who had been fighting excitedly were forcefully called back. They were all restless like little ponies. When Lu Jingxian rushed back to the main camp on Jiantian Cliff, the sky had already brightened. The originally neat and tidy camp now looked like it had been burned by fire and ravaged by bandits. Looking at the large groups of dead soldiers sitting in the center of the camp, LV Jingxian, who had not slept for the entire night, looked even worse. "Who's your general? How many people are there?" Lu Jingxian asked in a deep voice as he stared at a soldier of the East Army who was chatting among his own soldiers. The soldier stared blankly for a moment before quickly reporting to the general, "This lowly one has already died in battle." The dead could not speak. Lu Jingxian's face couldn't help but twist. He gave a cold snort and left. The soldier frowned with worry. His face was full of confusion. He didn't say anything to make General Lu angry, right? On the mountain slope 20 li away, there was a fierce battle for position. However, the defending army, which had suddenly lost half of its men, was gradually showing signs of decline. On Jiantian Cliff, it was a different scene. The East Army would come and besiege them from time to time. When they were beaten back by the West Army, they would not continue to harass them. They would retreat and rest before coming back to continue the battle. If they were on the plains, this kind of provocation would be seeking their own deaths. However, on Jiantian Cliff, where the mountain was rugged and the path was rugged, sometimes there was no difference between 10,000 men and 3,000 men. By the time Lu Jingxian had a thorough understanding of the enemy's forces, there were less than 4,000 men after deducting those who had died in battle and stayed in his camp to eat and drink for free. It was too late for regrets. Because these 4,000 men were firmly blocking the main path leading to the outside reinforcements. Over 10,000 men could only watch as their own forces 20 li away were slowly wiped out by the enemy. The depressed Lu Jingxian swore to annihilate this group of people on Jiantian Cliff. As a result, a complicated battle for position began on Jiantian Cliff. There was only a small area on the main path leading out. Both sides were unable to mobilize their entire army. Thus, the West Army occupied the entrance. Before the reinforcements could leave the pass, they were suppressed by the East Army. The East Army occupied the entrance. In less than an hour, the West Army rushed up and continued the battle. Both sides suffered countless casualties. The most peculiar thing was that during the battle, both sides would fight to the death and use all kinds of methods. However, once it was determined that someone had died, everyone would be good brothers. They would sit on the side and continue to watch their comrades kill each other. This battle continued until the afternoon of the same day. The small entrance had been fought over 4 or 5 times by both sides. Both sides had suffered heavy losses. Yi Li and Feng Zhiyao's original 4,000 men had less than 2,000 left. Lu Jinxian's side had also lost close to 3,000 men. However, if Zhang Qilan could not take down the enemy in front of them by tomorrow morning, all their efforts would be for naught. They would all be wiped out. Therefore, after seeing Zhang Qilan's signal, Yi Li and Feng Zhiyao couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. However, Lu Jinxian's face darkened. The pass in front of them had been broken. There was no meaning in staying at the entrance in front of them. Lu Jingxian snorted and returned to the camp with a dark face. Looking at the back of Lu Jingxian from afar, Feng Zhiyao sat on a large smooth rock and laughed. Yi Li sat on the side and glanced at him. What made young Master Feng laugh like this? Feng Zhiyao sat up and said, what else could it be? Did Wang Fei not see Lu Jinxian's expression? Haha, that guy always boasted that he was the best commander of the Mahist army under the prince. He was only slightly convinced by Zhang Qilan. Right now, General Zhang is still 20 li away. After fighting for an entire day, he still doesn't know who his opponent is. Do you think his expression is good? Yi Li helplessly shook her head and said, we were lucky this time. If General Zhang was a few hours later. Young Master Feng, you and I would have become General Lu's captives. Feng Zhiyao rubbed his nose and complained, why didn't Wang Fei let Qi Lin participate in the battle? Yi Li smiled at him and said, this is a drill. If we use cheats in a drill, we might as well act. Cheats? What was that? Chapter 565. By the time Zhang Qilan brought his army to meet up with Yi Li and Feng Zhiyao, it would be another tough battle. However, it was better than what they had expected. At the very least, they were at the top of the cliff and not being suppressed by someone from a higher ground. Furthermore, Lu Jinxian's 30,000 men had already lost more than half of their numbers. However, they had lost less than 10% of their own men. Thinking of this, Zhang Qilan couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. Outside a small city several kilometers away, Mo Xiuyao sighed helplessly as he stood outside the camp and looked at the small city that was isolated and had its gates tightly shut. Yun Ting and Qin Yun beside him looked at the prince strangely, not understanding why the prince sighed. In the end, Yun Ting couldn't hold back his words and couldn't help but ask, Your Highness, is there something troubling you? Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said, I'm afraid Lu Jingxian won't be able to hold on for much longer. Not knowing Yun Ting, even the usually calm Qin Yun didn't believe it. He frowned and said, the cliff is a dangerous place. Even if General Zhang has 100,000 men, he won't be able to do anything. Wise Prince, Mo Xiuyao handed the battle report to Qin Yun and said, ever since Zhang Qilan arrived, Li and Feng San have not appeared. I'm afraid that the two of them have taken a detour behind Lu Jingxian. If that's the case, Lu Jingxian's defense in the first 20 li of the cliff will be useless. Once the two armies reach the cliff, even if Zhang Qilan's 100,000 men can't do anything, they can take turns to grind Lu Jingxian's 10 to 20,000 men to death. Hearing Mo Xiuyao's words, Chen Yun and Yun Ting's expressions changed. Yun Ting said, "Prince, I'm willing to go and reinforce General Lu." Mo Xiuyao looked at him and said indifferently, "Reinforce? Where are we going to get reinforcements? What's more, even if I give you 10 or 20,000 men, what can they do in front of an army of 100,000? Yun Ting was speechless. Then what should we do? Mo Xiuyao turned his gaze to the isolated city in front of them and said in a low voice, "Attack the city with full force. We must take down this city before Zhang Qilan's men arrive." Chen Yun and Yun Ting's expressions were solemn as they stood up and said, "This subordinate obeys." Although Mo Xiuyao said that he would attack the city with all his might, this small city was not that easy to take down. Yuan Pei was a veteran of the Mahist army and was especially good at defending cities. In a situation where Mo Xiuyao didn't have the advantage in numbers, as long as Yuan Pei didn't care about anything else and waited for reinforcements, Mo Xiuyao wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Even if Mo Xiuyao had 1,000 plans, Yuan Pei was as steady as a mountain and didn't care about anything. Even if Yun Ting and the others cursed at him every day, the people on the city walls didn't open the city gates and couldn't do anything about it. On the cliff of Jiantian, the two armies faced off for 4 to 5 days before they finally wiped out Lu Jingxian's 10,000 men. Lu Jingxian was personally captured by Zhang Qilan. The two of them had worked together for more than 10 years and had often fought with each other. Although he lost to Zhang Qilan this time, Lu Jingxian didn't feel ashamed. Seeing his subordinates completely annihilated, Lv Jingxian, who was exhausted from the battle, threw away his weapon and said to Zhang Qilan, who was extremely proud of himself, "I lost." Zhang Qilan pulled him up with a face full of smiles and chuckled. "Victory and defeat are common in battle. Don't take it to heart." Lu Jingxian snorted softly and said, "You definitely couldn't have broken through my defenses so quickly. Where is Wang Fei?" The young generals watching stilled. The Prince Ding mansion still had a former Princess Wang Fei because she was unwilling to leave the Dechu state. Mo Xiuyao had ordered Leng Haoyu to protect her in secret. But in the minds of the Mahist army, there was only one Wang Fei right now. But how come they didn't know that the Wang Fei was in their army? Everyone's gaze looked at Zhang Qilan. Who told him to be the main general? If even he didn't know the whereabouts of the Wang Fei, then no one else would. Zhang Qilan laughed dryly and looked at Yi Li, who had come with Feng Zhiyao. Lu Jingxian stilled and didn't recognize Yi Li. But he was very familiar with Qin Feng and Wei Lin, who were following behind Yi Li. It was clear who it was that both Qin Feng and Wei Lin were following at the same time. When he looked closely at Yi Li, who was standing next to Feng Zhiyao, he immediately felt that it was the Wang Fei. This subordinate greets Wang Fei. Lu Jingxian went forward and bowed. Yi Li grimaced helplessly. Looking at the petrified crowd in front of her, she said, "General Lu, rise." Lu Jingxian raised his hands in a bow and said with a smile, "This one accepts defeat at Wang Fei's hands." Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "General overpraises." Yi Li just did her best. Lu Jingxian didn't care. In any case, he definitely wouldn't admit that he had lost to Zhang Qilan, at least not to his face. This one doesn't have anything else to do, so this one will take his people and leave first. I wish Wang Fei a safe journey. Yi Li nodded and said, "Many thanks for General's auspicious words." Seeing Lu Jingxian leave confidently with the soldiers who had been declared dead, the remaining people were silent. Was it really all right to wish the main general of the enemy a safe journey? After passing through Jiantian Cliff, even though the road behind them wasn't flat, it was still very calm. They didn't dare to delay at all. The group of people sprinted towards the isolated city to help Yuan Pei. At this time, on the walls of the small isolated city, Mo Xiuyao was dressed in white. He wasn't even wearing his battle robes. He looked at the old General Yuan Pei and said with a smile, "Old General, this time I won." The white-haired General Yuan Pei looked at the man in front of him whose hair was as white as snow but still as proud as the wind. A thread of relief and joy flashed through his eyes. He nodded and said, "It is true that Prince has won. This old man admits defeat." In terms of military strength, Mo Xiuyao was only slightly better than Yuan Pei. Attacking a city was much harder than defending it. Back then, Shi Ling's army of more than 100,000 had not been able to break through a small city in Jiangxia. Now, Prince Ding had broken through in a few short days. This was his ability. Yuan Pei was not a person who refused to admit defeat because of old age. He felt very gratified that the Ding king's household had a successor. If this was a real battlefield, I would not have been able to take this city so easily. This isolated city was truly isolated because it was a newly built city. There hadn't even been time for residents to move in. And on a battlefield, there wouldn't be a city that had basically nothing. Yuan Pei laughed loudly and said, "Many thanks to Prince. But if this was a real battlefield, Prince wouldn't have only brought a few tens of thousands of troops to attack a city, right?" The two looked at each other and smiled. Clearly, they were in a good mood. "Reporting to Prince, there are troops coming this way." A soldier on the city wall rushed over to report. "Oh." Mo Xiuyao looked over. In the distance, there was indeed the sound of hooves and dust rising. In less than an hour, Yi Li, Feng Zhiyao, and Zhang Qilan had already led their troops to the city. Mo Xiuyao looked around and saw at least 80 to 90,000 troops. He couldn't help but praise, to be able to wipe out Lu Jinxian's troops with less than 20,000 losses. That's not bad. Looking down at the people below, he smiled faintly and said, "General Zhang, Feng San, Li, you've come too late." Feng Zhiyao gritted his teeth in regret. Looking at the situation, if they had come 2 to 4 hours earlier, the situation would have been very different. Unfortunately, on the battlefield, the difference of half an hour could often completely change the outcome of a battle. Princess. Chapter 566. Yi Li raised her head to look at the man in white on the city wall. Her lips slowly curved into a faint smile. She raised her right hand slightly. Her soft voice spread across the entire battlefield, "Attack." On the city gate tower, Mo Xiuyao looked helplessly at the army that was preparing to attack the city. Yuan Pei, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Mo Xiuyao with a smile and said, "Your Highness, it seems that this battle isn't over yet." Mo Xiuyao smiled bitterly, "Old General is right. I celebrated too early. According to the rules of the drill would end when the city was breached. They had won. But since it was a drill, they had to train the new soldiers as much as possible. Furthermore, there was no rule on the battlefield that said a city couldn't be taken back after it was breached. As a result, the curtain was raised on a large-scale siege battle once again. This time, the siege was even more difficult than Mo Xiuyao's previous siege. The two sides fought for 7 days without a victor being decided. In the end, they could only announce a draw. This was because Mo Xiuyao's city had no more rations. This was a completely isolated city. Even though there were no civilians who needed extra rations, it also meant that there was no other food in the city other than the rations they brought with them. As for Yuan Pei, he had already destroyed the food that originally belonged to the defenders on the day the city was breached. Not only did Mo Xiuyao's subordinates suffer heavy losses, they even had no food to eat and could only defend the city with empty stomachs. The soldiers outside the city weren't doing any better. In a moment of carelessness, Mo Xiuyao's men destroyed most of their rations. In the end, neither side was willing to admit defeat. Seeing that they were about to run out of energy, old General Yuan Pei could only call for a halt. In the end, the two sides agreed to a draw. When Prince Ding and Princess Ding announced the end of the drill, many soldiers couldn't help but cry tears of joy. Of course, this wasn't because they thought they had won. It was because they could finally eat. Obviously, there was a large amount of food and fodder piled up outside the city, but they had to watch their dead brothers eat and drink well while lying to themselves that they had run out of food. These days were 10 times, 100 times worse than when they ran out of food. As soon as the drill was over, no one cared about anything else. They set up camp on the spot, buried pots, and cooked rice. The soldiers who had been fighting fiercely just now were all on good terms with each other. Especially when he saw that the other party's eyes were also green from hunger, a special kind of comrade in arms spontaneously arose in his heart. In the small city, the generals who had just finished eating and drinking also gathered together. Because the siege had lasted for too long, even Lu Jingxian, who had already returned, came back to watch the battle. Now that the battle was over, both sides had their own victories and defeats. No one had lost face, so the atmosphere was still harmonious. But the young generals of the Eastern Army that had been with Yi Li looked at Yi Li, who was still dressed in white, and their eyes were still dazed. A few days ago, they had been so busy with the battle that they didn't have the mind to care. Now that the battle was over, the young men finally remembered that the white-clothed young master that they had intentionally or unintentionally pushed aside and made them promise General Lu was the Wang Fei that they had always respected. This strong impact made the group of young men feel uncomfortable. Wang Fei. The young men pushed each other and finally pushed out an unlucky person, Wang Fei. This subordinate was blind before and offended Wang Fei. Wang Fei, please punish us. Zhang Qilan glanced at the incompetent juniors and said, "You brats still have the face to say this? This old man had repeatedly told you to be polite to Wang Fei. What did you do?" Everyone stared at him silently. "You were talking about Mr. Chu and not Wang Fei." Seeing the aggrieved gazes of the young people, Zhang Qilan was silent. He snickered and looked at Yi Li, saying that Wang Fei, this subordinate, did not explain this to them clearly. "Wang Fei, please do not take offense." Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "General Zhang is too serious. This was originally my intention. Also, it is hard for young people to not be young and impetuous. General Zhang and the other generals have taught well. These young generals are all good seedlings." Being praised by Wang Fei, everyone felt their lips twitch. They were young, but compared to Wang Fei, who was just 21 or 22 years old, most of them were older. Being called young and impetuous by Wang Fei, they couldn't help but blush. On the side, Yunting was complaining inside, "What are you all doing?" When he met Wang Fei was only 15 or 16 years old. With Yi Li's praise, the other generals also revealed smiles on their faces. Even though these young people were following Zhang Qilan this time, they were not all Zhang Qilan's subordinates. Among them were Lu Jingxian, Yuan Pei, and even Sun Yan's subordinates who were stationed at Feihong Pass. They were all elites of the young generation. When they were praised, as their superiors, the generals felt they had face. Hearing Wang Fei say that she would not blame them, the young people all sighed in relief. The young people were very curious. Even though they were far away, they thought that they were secretly examining Wang Fei. After all, they had heard of Princess Ding's deeds before they had entered the Mahist army. Who would have thought that there would be a day when they would be able to see and even fight side by side with Princess Ding? But they did not know that their actions, which they thought were secretive, had already caused someone to be displeased. So much so that when they returned to the army, before they could even breathe properly, they were thrown into some training camp for 2 or 3 months. They could only think of it as the generals being dissatisfied with their performance in the drill. After the drill ended, Zhang Qilan and Lu Jingxian were left to clean up. Mo Xiuyao took Yi Li, Feng Zhiyao, and the others back to Li City. She had just returned to Ding Wangfu and had yet to enter the study when she met young Master Qing Chen, who was walking towards her. She only needed to look at his expression to know that young Master Qing Chen was very dissatisfied with a certain irresponsible Wang Yi who had thrown the affairs of the Northwest to him. Her gaze calmly swept over Mo Xiuyao, who looked better than usual after half a month of marching and fighting. Su Qingchen asked faintly, "It seems that Prince has been well these days?" Mo Xiuyao smiled and said in a good mood, "I haven't moved for many years. It's good to move around." Su Qingchen smiled faintly. "What? Then congratulations to Prince. In the future, Prince will be able to move around more often." What did she mean? Mo Xiuyao looked at Su Qingchen in confusion. Su Qingchen sighed and waved the battle report she had just received. The Dechu State's army has been losing battles in the north. In less than a month, they have already lost 4 cities to the north. Mo Xiuyao was silent for a moment. He raised his head and smiled faintly at Su Qingchen. "This has nothing to do with us." The Mahist army and the Dechu state had already broken off all ties. How the Dechu state fought had nothing to do with them. Su Qingchen nodded and said faintly, "As long as Prince knows what to do, it's fine." In addition, the northern tribes have sent news. The northern tribes are also restless. Once the Dechu state is unfavorable to the war in the north, the northern tribes will definitely invade the south next spring. As Mo Xiuyao listened to Su Qingchen's words, he continued to walk toward the study. He asked, "What news is there from Nanzhao?" Su Qingchen said, "The heir of Genom of Gojoseon has led an army of 300,000 and is already stationed at the Nanzhao border. The 2 countries are in a standoff. It is unknown when the war will begin." "Will the war begin?" Mo Xiuyao turned back and asked. Su Qingchen was silent for a moment. She replied in a low voice, "Yes." Mo Xiuyao paused and said, "Good. Once the war begins, the Shilin will not have time to attend to anything else for a while." Following behind him, Feng Zhiyao frowned and asked, "Prince, shouldn't we also prepare?" Mo Xiuyao thought for a moment and nodded. After the war between Nanzhao and the Shilin begins, issue a conscription order in the northwest. Feng Zhiyao agreed. Su Qingchen received Mo Xiuyao's gaze and shook her head. "I don't understand military matters. You guys do as you see fit." Mo Xiuyao nodded and said to Feng Zhiyao, "Go prepare." After the Prince Ding mansion took control of the northwest, the conscription system had been reformed many times. It was somewhat different from the current military service system. All youths in the northwest who had reached the age of 18 had to serve 2 years of military service. After 2 years, they would be stripped of their armor and returned to the fields. But after that, they still had to undergo military training for a month every year. Most importantly, these 2 years of military service were not limited to ordinary people. Merchants and even scholars had to participate. But scholars could reduce it to 1 year. So now, all the students of Lishan Academy who had reached the age of 18 had already served military service. In addition, the Mahist army had a standing army of 900,000. The soldiers in these armies had all served for more than 5 years, and all of them would serve for 30 years or even longer. They were the true fighting force of the Northwest. Also, they were different from the 2-year conscripts who had no pay and were different from most of the soldiers of other countries who had no pay. They received a certain amount of pay every month and a certain amount of pension if they died in battle. Although the Prince Ding mansion created a certain amount of financial pressure, it also fought for the Mahist army's fighting strength and cohesion. Compared to the millions of soldiers of the other 3 countries, the Mahist army's 900,000 soldiers were not enough. But once a war really broke out and the conscription order was issued, the Prince Ding mansion could instantly organize an army of over 1 million properly trained soldiers. Although their fighting strength could not compare to the real Mahist army, it was definitely not something that some soldiers who had just been pulled into the army and entered the battlefield could compare to. At the very least, they had been trained by the generals of the real Mahist army. Looking at Mo Xiuyao's departing figure, Feng Zhiyao sighed and looked up at the sky. Once Nanzhao and Xiling went to war, the northern tribes would definitely get a share of the Dechu state. And the Prince Ding mansion would definitely not be able to stay out of this. After so many years of preparation, was it finally about to begin? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.